Hey guys, imagine waking up to the smell of charred bread and the distant roar of flames racing down your street like a herd of stampeding bulls. Only these bulls are made of actual fire, and it will happily turn your rickety home into kindling in seconds. That was London, September 2nd, 1666. And you're totally unprepared. Before you get comfortable, please hit like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do. Drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's dive together into today's journey. Part 1. You wake up in your cramped, sagging tenement above the baker's shop on Pudding Lane. Your alarm clock is the shriek of the baker himself cursing over a burnt batch. Again. You stretch, nearly knocking over a dripping gutter outside your window, and glance at the dawn sky. Instead of the usual gray, it's a horrifying shade of ember. You think, great, sunrise or apocalypse? Hard to tell. Stepping out, the air is thick with smoke. Your lungs seize in protest, but hey, that's just Tuesday in London. You choke back a cough, wrap your threadbare shawl around your face like some avant-garde plague doctor, and shuffle down the stairs. Each step creaks so dangerously you half expect to plummet through to the cellar below, where the old Rat King resides. Sadly, rats aren't your biggest problem today. Outside, the streets are in mild chaos. Vendors screaming that their poultry is burning. Children sobbing because the kindly chimney sweep won't let them play with embers, and townsfolk forming loose lines to haul buckets from the Thames. You're pulled into this impromptu bucket brigade because who wouldn't want to stand shoulder deep in freezing river water while carrying a pail heavier than your own head? Absolutely every soul with a beating heart and functioning lungs. Cheers to community spirit. You grab a leaky bucket, the handle dancing on your forearm, and join the line. In front of you, old Mrs. Coote is cackling madly, brandishing her bucket like a cutlass. By Jove, if I don't douse that infernal blaze, the whole stinking city will go up. She yells, cartwheeling her bucket. Most of the water lands on her own skirts. You can't help but smile as she mutters, blast these skirts too fancy to get wet, and plods on. The next link in the chain is young Tom, who fancies himself a hero, despite being only 13 and still working off a 3-month sentence for nicking pears. He snatches the bucket from Mrs. Coote, practically mugging her for it, and charges toward the nearest burning house. You watch, horrified, as he flings the water at the blaze. The flames roar in defiance as if to say, "Is that the best you've got, kid?" And then Tom's bucket handle snaps. The bucket plummets, scattering water in a pathetic puddle at his boots. The fire barely flinches. Tom shrugs, dusts off, and grabs another bucket like nothing happened. Mighty brave or mighty stupid. You decide later which. Meanwhile, you're hauling buckets in, out, in, out. The rhythmic swish of water and clamor of shouts become a bizarre lullaby. Sweat soaks your shirt despite the chill, and your arms threaten mutiny. But quitting isn't an option. The fire is galloping down rooftops like some mythical beast, and if it reaches the great wooden warehouse, well, London's entire supply of fish guts would go up in smoke, and that, dear viewer, would be a tragedy of Shakespearean proportions. By mid-morning, word spreads that the fire began in the bakery on Pudding Lane. You look back up your own street. Your neighbors are frantically tossing pots, pans, and everything not nailed down into the road. Mrs. Granger launches her prized teapot over the parapet, complete with Earl Grey still brewing inside. The teapot shatters spectacularly against a stone wall, spraying tea everywhere. For a moment, there's silence. Then a collective groan. You sympathize. The thought of never tasting a proper cuppa again is almost enough motivation to catch fire on your own terms. But survival instincts kick in. You realize your own front door is opening of its own accord, heat pushing through like an angry zookeeper releasing a jaguar. You sprint back towards your tenement. In seconds, the smoke is so thick you can barely see your own hand, and you're coughing like a tuberculotic foghorn. You duck inside, yank down your rickety window shutter, and toss out your last remaining possessions. A ratty blanket, a half-eaten hunk of stale bread, and your favorite wooden spoon. Yes, a wooden spoon, whatever. As you clamber out the window, you imagine Sir Christopher Wren himself sculpting your silhouette in molten gold, elf and acrobat leaping from second-story window. But there's no applause, only a chorus of "Watch out!" Some poor fellow, distracted by a charred chicken escaping its coop, stumbles into your landing zone. You collide mid-air, flop into a muddy alley, and roll head over heels. You end up flat on your back, staring at the sky, trying to remember which side is up. At least the Rat King didn't mob you. Small victories. You haul yourself up, momentarily pleased you still own all your limbs. But your relief is short-lived. A hay cart barrels by, driver blind as a bat from smoke, and clips you with a wheel. You spin, catch onto the wagon's back rung for a heartbeat, and then fall into a puddle of who knows what. You taste something tangy, probably horse spit. You gag, slump to your knees, and mutter, "Spectacular." Realizing that standing still is a poor survival strategy in a firestorm, you decide to move. You head towards the river, better odds of rescue than being roast chicken on Pudding Lane. The crowds here are a fascinating blend. Rich dandies in soot-streaked lace collars, frantic mothers clutching crying children, and opportunistic pickpockets feigning sympathy. You sidestep a trio of highwaymen disguised as clergy, browbeating the terrified into handing over whatever valuables remain. That's one profession you'd never last. Too much paperwork, too few burning buildings. As you reach the riverbank, the water beckons like a shining light in a smoky haze. You step onto a small rowboat, piloted by an old river rat named Jacques. No relation to any Rat King, thankfully. 40 coins to safety. He hoots, brandishing a grubby hat. You dig through your pockets, find exactly 40 coins, your entire fortune, mostly lent to the tavern owner last night. "Deal," you pant. Jacques grudgingly hands you an oar and reminds you, "Row like your life depends on it, because it does, you daft fool." You paddle desperately, each stroke a battle against exhaustion and the weight of your crumbling soul. Up ahead, the Tower of London looms like a dark monolith, mirrors of regal stability amid chaos. You fantasize that if you can just reach its walls, someone, anyone, will give you shelter. Peasants huddle behind battlements. Soldiers shout orders you can't hear over the roar of destruction. You wave frantically, but everyone's too busy hauling buckets or shooting arrows at looters. That's right, in 1666, you can't just call the guard. You have to wait for someone to notice you're not a corpse yet. Suddenly, a massive ember shower descends from the sky, setting your oar ablaze. You shriek, drop it, and flap your arms, fighting the urge to spontaneously combust. Jacques is cackling. "That's London's finest fireworks show. Beats the King's birthday any day." You ignore him, scrambling for another oar. The boat rocks dangerously, and for a horrible second you imagine plunging into the Thames, gnawed on by catfish. You shudder. These nightmares aren't included in your bedtime stories. At this point, you're soaked, bruised, and basically a charcoal briquette with a pulse. Yet somehow, that's more alive than half of London's population at the moment. You glance back. Flames lick the horizon, devouring wood and hope in equal measure. The city's iconic skyline, St. Paul's Cathedral, St. Mary's Spire, shimmers between plumes of smoke, like ghosts mourning their own demise. The silence between roars is deafening. You catch sight of your home, now half-inch of ash and crumbled beams. You feel a pang of sorrow. Somewhere in there was your childhood stuffed animal, a pencil stub drawing of your pet rat, Mrs. Whiskers. You brush away the sentiment with a cough. Sentiment is a luxury you can't afford. Instead, you prepare for part 2 of your epic odyssey, finding food that's not set ablaze and lodging that isn't a smoldering pile of splinters. But that, my friends, is a story for the next installment. For now, you and Jacques drift away under the tower's shadow, wrapped in blankets that smell like damp sheep and regret. Ahead lies a city half dead, but stubbornly refusing to vanish. Your lungs ache, your muscles scream, and your brain is already bargaining with higher powers for a proper cup of tea. Spoiler alert, you'll get it eventually, once this whole fire fiasco is over and the baker stops burning everything he touches. So take a deep breath, if you can, because surviving the Great Fire of London is only the beginning. Next time, we'll tackle the thrill of scavenging dinner while avoiding rogue apothecaries selling you snake oil, and the timeless joy of sleeping on someone's stable floor surrounded by hay-smelling strangers. Oh, and maybe we'll glimpse the first glimmer of hope as London starts to rebuild from its own ashes. But that's for part 2. Until then, keep those sleeves rolled up, your wits about you, and remember, in 1666, survival of the fittest means survival of the person least likely to spontaneously combust. See you next time. Same smoky channel, same sarcastic disaster. The Thames carries you and Jacques farther downstream, its murky waters lapping at the sides of the boat like a persistent gossip whispering in your ear. You're never going to get a proper night's sleep again. Beneath the tower's shadow, you have 3 options: beg for charity, barge into a stranger's stable, or wander the ruins hoping to find something edible that isn't still smoldering. Naturally, you pick all 3 in rapid succession. First, charity. You clamber onto the riverbank, dripping like a drowned rat. Ironic, since you're fresh out of rats to eat, and join a ragged line snaking toward a hastily erected relief tent made of tarps, broken masts, in sheer desperation. A dozen pails of gruel bubble over on a fire that looks as temperamental as the baker's oven. You edge forward, stomach rumbling louder than the dying roar of the fire. At the front, a stern-faced matron ladles out porcelain-thin gruel into wooden bowls. You accept yours with the enthusiasm of a man about to taste the sweetest nectar on earth. Spoon to lip, you realize that gruel is medieval for water flavored with disappointment. It's so watery you could use it to baptize a flea. You swallow, nod politely, and promptly dump the rest on the dirt in case you need to trace your own footprints later. The matron frowns. You offer her a wink. She does not appreciate humor. Fine. More for you to spill unwittingly. Next up, stable lodging. Someone, probably you, suggested it was a brilliant idea to sleep in a straw pile away from crumbling rooftops. You find an old stable behind a half-collapsed inn, smell the fumes of yesterday's horse feed, and decide it's as good as any 5-star hotel. Jacques smirks. Fresh hay, no rats, and some nobleman's nags will keep you warm, he assures you. You roll out your damp blanket on a mound of hay that immediately unleashes a cloud of dust and who knows what. You sneeze, clear your head, and tell yourself it's character building. Night falls quickly when your eyelids feel like anvils. But the stable is no sanctuary. First, the mice stage a parade across your nose. Then, the horses next door whinny about dreams of galloping across flaming fields. Finally, a sleep-deprived guard staggers in looking for someone who owes me a coin. You wake, half blind, and accidentally headbutt a hay bale. The guard vanishes. You congratulate yourself on surviving Part 2's premiere challenge, sleeping without dying in your sleep. Morning. You emerge, hay in your hair, straw wedged in your teeth, and a vague itch on your left ear that will stay with you until the next great pestilence. You remember your priorities: food, water, information. Water shouldn't be a problem. The Thames is right there. Food, however, the only thing edible within walking distance is a half-scorched turnip that looks like a miniature charcoal grenade. You pocket it out of both hunger and curiosity. Information: who's rebuilding, where to find work, how to avoid being pressed into the King's Navy. You wander into King Street, well, what's left of it, dodging debris that still emits smoky sighs. You pass by a group of reconstruction overseers, clipboard in hand, barking orders. They wear powdered wigs that keep falling into their soot-smeared eyes and waistcoats that must cost a fortune, which you suspect is now burnt to a crisp. They look at you as though you've just entered from another planet. You clear your throat. "Excuse me, sir. Good sir, esteemed overseer." You bow so low you nearly kiss your own boots. He glances up, sighs, and says, "Tax relief, free labor. I'm not here to entertain your pleasantries." Then he lasers you with a glare that could ignite tinder. You scurry off, chastened, determined that if manual labor and anorexic gruel are all the city offers, you'll take your chances elsewhere. Eastward, you discover a cluster of makeshift markets. Everyone's selling something: burnt spoons, half-rotted meats, water filtration services, involve boiling Thames water over a smoldering grate. Deluxe. You examine a vendor hawking authentic post-disaster bread, which smells faintly of hot coals and broken dreams. The loaves are as dense as a granite boulder. You consider using one as an improvised weapon, but decide that at least someone is making an honest, if unpalatable, living. Suddenly, cries erupt. A troupe of itinerant players, actors in tatters, face paint smeared by soot, has gathered a crowd for the tragicomedy of London's fall. They're reenacting the fire. The stage is a wobbly cart, the backdrop a charred sheet, and the cast includes a guy with a papier-mâché saint, Paul's spire who's struggling to keep it standing. You press forward. The lead actor, in a flamboyant leopard skin robe that is entirely inappropriate for 1666 London, declaims, "Oh, mighty flames, thou hast devoured our wooden womb, yet from thy ashes stronger steel shall loom." The crowd claps politely, mostly out of pity. You wonder whether quoting Shakespeare here would land you in a better role, but doubt it. Instead, you lob your turnip at the stage, hard enough to dent the papier-mâché spire. The actor gasps, limps off stage, and the audience showers you with laughter, applause, and a few mild curses. You take a flamboyant bow. Who knew destructive vegetables could win applause? Between the charred stalls and impromptu theater, you overhear whispers of work on the rebuilding effort. House movers, bricklayers, architects, i.e. nerds with rulers. You approach a burly chap chiseling bricks with the enthusiasm of a man who's accepted that his life is now alternating between sweat and soot. He tells you bricks are in short supply, but lead sheets salvaged from old roofs are being repurposed for canal repairs, and they need bodies to carry them. You have strong arms, bucket brigade champion, remember? And weak lungs, but decide to sell your bronze-clad ribs to the highest bidder. By midday, you're schlepping lead sheets across a courtyard big enough to host the coronation of a flea circus. Each sheet weighs as much as your regrets. You stagger under the load, breathing in smoke-laced air that tastes like regret, mixed with burnt pancake. A supervisor with a quill behind his ear times each load. 15 seconds on the dot? He demands. A true Londoner should carry twice that in half the time. You fake a heart attack to gain a breather. They are unimpressed. You hobble on, motivated by the fact that without this coin, you'll be back to living under hay with mice critiquing your every move. At the end of the shift, you've earned enough to buy a crust of bread that isn't charcoal tinged. You celebrate by gobbling down half of it, only to realize it's stale. You pretend it's artisanal. Meanwhile, Jacques appears with a glint in his eye and an invitation. "I've secured us a gig," he says. You raise an eyebrow. "Street cleaners for the royal parade." You vomit silently. "What's next, cleaning the king's chamber pot?" He laughs. "One step at a time, pal." That night, as you slump against a half-erect scaffold, you watch the skyline. Against the smoky canvas, silhouettes of cranes, the wooden kind, hoist girders, and men with axes reshape the city. You recall plans by Sir Christopher Wren to rebuild in brick, wide streets, and even a new cathedral dome. You think, if this plan succeeds, you might never again have to haul lead sheets through ash-choked air. Hope flickers. Let's call it the size of a match flame. Sleep, when it comes, is a fitful memory of carrying buckets in the dark, chased by visions of embers, enraged bakers, and hay bales launching themselves at you in your dreams. You wake before dawn, stiff, every muscle singing a ballad of complaint, but determined to seize the day, or at least not be trampled by a rogue wagon this time. Day 3. Your stomach rumbles louder than a fired cannon, reminding you that human beings cannot survive on stale bread alone. You barter your remaining crust for a stew of dubious origin, likely made from peas that survived the fire because they were always underfoot. The vendor offers you a spoon for free, which in this economy means you owe him a favor. You accept. Favors. In 1666, London are the currency of misfortune. Whatever promise you extract, remind yourself to have an exit strategy. Armed with lukewarm stew, you traverse the debris fields where rooftops have collapsed into tight piles of logs, beams, and shattered dreams. Occasionally, you spot an old silver spoon glinting in the rubble. A treasure indeed, until you remember silver sells for precisely enough to buy 3 loaves of bread. You pocket one spoon for sentiment's sake and toss another to Jacques, who immediately scuffs it across the stones. "Rocks here sharpen anything," he quips. You glare. He shrugs and pockets it anyway. Rumor buzzes through the crowd like a persistent hornet. The army is recruiting to guard against opportunistic French spies and Dutch marauders. The recruiter's cart is festooned with tattered flags and offers a bounty of 20 shillings, enough to buy a decent meal and a night's lodging in a stable without mice. You weigh your options, survive the militia's harsh discipline, or keep hauling lead sheets until your lungs stage a revolt. The militia promises 3 square meals a day, assuming you don't get shot, and a uniform that might finally cover your burnt garments. That's tempting. You join the line. The recruiter is a handsome fellow with a mustache that looks like 2 curled mice glued to his upper lip. He asks, "Ever fired a musket?" You stammer, "Yes, once. I fired it at a fire, hoping it'd stop burning." He blinks, impressed or horrified. Perfect, he says, handing you a musket and a uniformed shirt so big you could hide 3 of you inside. You nod gravely, aware that in a few days you may be issued orders to stand watch over the very city you helped burn, rebuild. Recruits march out to the outskirts, where the flames have finally been extinguished. You trudge behind a line of pikemen, sword bearers, and a fellow who insists on playing bagpipes despite the fact nobody asked for them. The charred plains stretch ahead, an apocalyptic panorama where smoke still curls upward, like the farewell letter of a lovesick poet. You post guard duty near a ruined church, checking for enemies, stray embers, and rats with geopolitical motives. Your orders: patrol the perimeter, ensure no criminals slip through to loot what's left, and send word if you spot any suspicious activity. You spend the next hours hiding behind a burnt pillar, eyeballing every pigeon as a potential spy. Each time a crow caws, you jump. The pigeons, for their part, stare at you like, "Dude, chill, we just want breadcrumbs." Time stretches. You practice musket drills, load, aim, wait for something to actually threaten your life. Your companion, Private Bumbles, an albino man with more freckles than reason, recounts tales of his tavern exploits. You nod, not daring to admit your life has been one long series of unfortunate events in taverns across London. Finally, late afternoon, a scout gallops in with news of a group trying to sneak lead sheets away under cover of smoke. You spring to action, shoulder musket, and follow the scout through winding alleys. You come upon 3 gaunt figures heaving lead onto a flatbed cart, drawn by a mule that looks ready to give up on life. You raise your musket. They freeze. You deliver your first order. Drop it. The leader, a scruffy fellow missing half a mustache, snorts. "We're only salvaging for honest use." You reply, "By order of the king, drop it or be dropped." They stare. You stare. The mule sneezes. Tension cracks like a biscuit. Then the leader politely sets down the lead and mumbles something about government logistics. With your heart still hammering, you escort them to an official holding area. Wonder if this counts as heroism, and briefly consider telling tales how you single-handedly thwarted a band of nefarious lead thieves. But you decide bragging rights aren't worth a missing ear. Instead, you accept the thanks of the recruiter, who pats you on the back so hard you nearly collapse, and pocket a shilling as a reward. You now have the makings of a full meal and half the price of a decent loaf. That evening, you lodge in the militia tent alongside Private Bumbles, who snores like a wounded boar. You wrap your blanket around you, still slightly damp and smelling faintly of horse sweat, and close your eyes. Tomorrow promises bricklaying, more patrols, and the chance to tell your grandchildren, "I helped save London." Sort of. From the smoldering ashes of London's worst disaster in living memory, you've clawed your way through floods of water, mounds of rubble, and more stale bread than a man ought to consume in 3 lifetimes. Your lungs are permanently smoky, your hair flecked with ash, but your spirit, call it cocky or call it foolish, refuses to be flattened. And yet you suspect the worst is behind you, or at least the beginning of the worst. Because rebuilding a city is like building a house of cards on a trampoline. Every new brick tempts gravity, bureaucracy, and an unfortunate gust of wind. In part 3, we'll follow your journey into bricklaying boots, meet the unpredictable workers who glue London back together, and explore the joys of sleeping in half-built houses with nothing but tarps overhead. But for now, rest, or at least attempt to, because surviving the Great Fire is only half the battle. Rebuilding the aftermath, that's where the real fun and sarcasm begins. See you in the rubble. You wake before dawn, muscles singing a requiem of regret from yesterday's shift, and realize that today's uniform, the ill-fitting militia shirt, smells like a library full of moldy books and regret. You pry yourself out of your damp blankets, stagger to a communal wash barrel, and splash icy water on your face. It hits like 1,000 biting minnows, but at least it's the Thames and not last night's spilt grog. By first light, you're trudging toward the new building site on Fleet Street, where Sir Christopher Wren's vision of orderly brick streets is, in practice, a chaotic pile of sandstone, half-baked bricks, and confused laborers. Your job today, bricklaying. You've never laid a brick in your life, and that's conveniently never mentioned in your job contract. The overseer, a spectacled man named Mr. Allocator, hands you a bucket of mortar and a trowel that looks like it was scavenged from a Roman ruin. Place each brick with care, he commands, or we'll send you back to hauling lead sheets. You squint at the bucket. The mortar smells vaguely of vinegar and old socks. You dip the trowel, scoop a gob of mortar, smear it onto the foundation stones, and then fumble the brick into place. It lands askew, wobbling like a drunk sailor. You push it upright, but in doing so, send a plume of mortar splattering onto your collar. You try to wipe it off, only to smear it deeper into the fabric. Congratulations. The first brick you've ever laid is already a crime scene in slow motion. Your neighbor on the line is Mad Tom, no relation to Fruit Thief Tom from the Bucket Brigade, who has a knack for turning every brick into a Picasso. Artistic flair, he calls it. The foreman calls it insubordination. You exchange sympathetic nods as his wall curves and dips like a miniature canyon. A passing architect shrieks, "That's a perfect drainage channel," and promptly is slapped in the face by a flying trowel. Bricklaying, 50% glue, 50% peril. Mid-morning, you pause for elevenses, which is code for a chance to inhale tea that's probably been boiled in Thames water. The kettle sits on a fire pit built from scavenged roof tiles, wobbling like a wounded duck. You and your fellow laborers cradle tin mugs and in unison take a sip. The tea tastes like burnt reeds mixed with despair. You glance at the new recruits sipping as though they're tasting nectar. You want to warn them, but you're too busy swallowing your own reluctance. By now, rumors swirl of political intrigue. Some insist the king will tax every new brick laid. Others claim the Dutch are planning a comeback invasion because they heard London's too busy rebuilding to defend itself. You contemplate whether the phrase loaves and fishes refers to bread and lead, or to taxes and tolls. The only certainty is that your stomach demands lunch, and if you don't eat soon, you'll end up gnawing on your own sleeve. Lunch arrives in the form of a vendor's cart, a stew of unidentifiable meat chunks floating in gloppy broth, ladled into wooden bowls with the grace of a guillotine. You buy one for $1 and find yourself negotiating fiercely for the spoon. The vendor, an acrobat of salesmanship, convinces you that the spoon is charitable and thus included. You pocket it, vowing to cherish it like the Holy Grail, despite its tendency to bend after one use. Halfway through the stew, you spot old Bert under the shade of a half-built arch. Bert's been working this site since the fire began and has the posture of a question mark. He's also found a treasure trove of lost items amid the rubble. Silver spoons, small copper coins, and, legend has it, a still intact rubber duck. You sidle over, hoping for insider tips. Bert leans in, eyes twinkling, and whispers, "Stay off the western quadrant when the Masons arrive. They're territorial. Last week they threw a bucket of water at my face for stepping on their sacred chalk line." You nod gravely. Chalk lines are serious business. After lunch, you're assigned to the western quadrant. Naturally, you trudge over, trowel in hand, and immediately a team of mustachioed masons glares at you as though you've cursed their mothers. You pretend not to notice and begin laying bricks again. 5 minutes in, you hear a shout, "Intruder!" You turn to see a seething mason charging with a ruler raised like a sword. You raise your trowel defensively and promptly slip on a stray lump of mortar, sending both ruler and mason flying. You land in a crouch, marshal your best Shakespearean flourish, and declare, "Fear not, fair colleague, for I come in peace," and trowel. The mason scrambles up, bloodied ego and knuckles, and storms off. You resume work, proud of your accidental victory. As shadows lengthen, you're finally allowed to clean tools, a privilege you take as fervently as a gambler, grabbing last drink before closing time. You rinse mortar off the trowel in a barrel, only to drop it and watch it sink. You fish it out with your bare hands, earning a lecture on proper tool care from Mr. Allocator. You promise to never again treat expensive instruments like cheap dinnerware. Your promise lasts until tomorrow. Evening approaches, and Sir Christopher Wren himself strolls through the site, accompanied by an entourage of assistants carrying measuring rods, parchment, and clipboards thicker than your last month's rent. He stops in front of your half-baked wall. You brace for criticism. Instead, he strokes his chin, rubs his beard against its own smudges of ash, and declares, "Interesting, almost revolutionary." Then he jots something on parchment and walks away before you can ask whether interesting means astonishingly bad or astonishingly avant-garde. You collect your wages, a measly purse of coins, and realize that with this you can buy exactly one dinner and half a loaf of bread. Welcome to the economics of 1666. You tuck the coins into your pocket and head toward a tavern promising free Wi-Fi, by which they mean warm corner to spit chewed bread into. Inside, the floorboards groan under the weight of patrons, and the smell of spilled ale could fell a stallion. You claim a stool, order the cheapest grog, and listen to the local bard, an out-of-work minstrel who strings together complaints about the fire in iambic pentameter. You offer him $1 to play a song that doesn't remind you of charred rooftops. He snorts, "Song's the fire's heartbeat, friend." He launches into a ballad called The Embered Lament, which features the refrain, "Ashes to ash, bricks to dust, London weeps in molten gusts." You endure 3 verses before your liver stages a coup, and you escape into the smoky night. Back at the militia camp, you collapse onto a straw mattress that squeaks like a haunted bed. Your comrades are recovering from food poisoning, scrubbing blood from their trousers, or loudly debating the merits of monarchy versus, well, not starvation. You drift to sleep dreaming of perfect bricklaying techniques, spacer blocks, leveled courses, and a life without scolding from Mr. Allocator. Night is brief because the Rat King, author of Midnight Squeaks, declares it time to party. You wake, shoo away rodents, and realize sleep in 1666 is more myth than reality. You stare at the flickering lantern light, wonder what dawn will bring, and hope it's nothing involving more mortar. Pre-dawn brings the site's caterpillar-like hum of activity, brick carts rolling, hammers pounding, and occasionally, masons shouting insults in archaic dialects you can't parse. You rise, dust yourself off, and prepare for another day of manual labor in the name of rebuilding the greatest city in the world. You remind yourself that survivors don't get a medal. They just get another shift and another stomach-turning lunch. In Part 4, we'll tackle the joys of truly sleeping in half-built houses, the politics of displaced neighbors vying for salvage rights, and a heart-pounding moment when you nearly fall from the first wooden scaffold erected since the fire. Plus, we'll uncover whether your budding friendship with Jacques can survive his next shady business venture, smuggling original burned timbers to gullible nobles for authentic London town decor. Spoiler, authenticity and ash don't mix well. Until next time, keep your mortar fresh, your bricks level, and your sense of humor intact, because when 1666 throws you a curveball, you'd better be ready to catch it with a trowel. Dawn finds you perched on a half-built windowsill of what promises to be a 5-story townhouse, pending you don't mislay any more bricks. The scaffold beneath you is a contraption of planks, ropes, and sheer optimism. You stretch, send a tiny avalanche of ash and mortar crumbs onto the street below, and wonder if this counts as urban landscaping. It's time to sleep in your own handiwork, if you don't die first from a surprise collapse. You ease yourself down onto the makeshift bed of timber beams and tattered canvas. The view is panoramic. To your left, a collapsed roof that resembles a sleeping dog. To your right, the tower's silhouette winking through lingering smoke. Below, vendors hawking pre-built apartments, 2 walls and a dream, and ex-bricklayers offering guaranteed no cave-ins for an extra groat. You remind yourself that luxury is overrated and that gravity is undefeated. Night before, you and Jacques sealed a deal. He'd sell authentic charred roof timbers to fancy gentry who want a bit of apocalypse chic in their drawing rooms. He recruited you as quality control, code for get on a wagon and hide fast if someone's looking. This morning, you report for duty at his staging area, a narrow alley cluttered with soggy crates. Jacques peers at you under the brim of a rat-soaked hat. Ready to earn our fortune? He grins. You nod, stomach churning with both excitement and the knowledge that timber smuggling is one of those 1666 jobs that ends either in wealth or the stocks. First task, load half-burnt beams onto a rickety cart. You each heft a beam that weighs roughly the same as your future regrets. The beams have one striking feature. They smell like smoke trapped in oak for eternity, perfect for gentry who want their libraries to smell of history. You load, balance, and cover with a tarp. Jacques tugs the dray forward. You jog behind, keeping an eye out for watchmen. Every clop of the mule's hooves echoes like a drum announcing your criminal enterprise. Halfway to the buyer's house, an opulent mansion untouched by flames, you nearly tip the cart on a hidden rut. You throw your weight onto the wagon tongue, screeching like a banshee. The driver yanks the reins, the mule swerves, and you bounce off, landing head first into a mid-sized puddle of something. You surface, gasp, and sputter. Almost a disaster, Jacques shouts, laughing so hard smoke comes out of his nose. You glare but can't help a wry smirk. Professional quality control. You mutter as you right the cart. The mansion's butler greets you with a disapproving sniff. He inspects the beams, runs an imperious finger along a charred edge, and nods once. Very authentic, he intones and hands Jacques 3 hefty gold coins. You pocket one as your share. Congratulations, Jacques grins. We're halfway to living like lords, or at least buying decent food this week. You nod, though your conscience mentions that true lords probably prefer unburned oak. With your pockets heavier, you set off to claim that dinner. But fate intervenes. At the tavern door, you're stopped by Mr. Allocator, Sir Christopher Wren's bricklaying foreman, who's imposing in soot-stained ruffs and an expression that reads, "I know your secret." He eyes your purse. "I trust you've been honest in your labors," he says, voice low. You whiten. "Yes, sir, honest labor." He taps his chin. There's always so much need for creative fundraising during reconstruction. He lets you pass with a suspicious glare. You exhale. Honest labor indeed. Inside the tavern, you celebrate with a plate of stewed pigeon, legitimately scavenged, and a pint of ale that tastes like fermented straw. You raise the glass to Jacques, who's already half lost in a gambling circle. You consider joining, but remember your last prudent gamble involved a charred turnip in a tossing contest. You sip your ale, savor the fleeting warmth in your chest, and send a silent thanks to whoever invented booze. Night falls again, and this time you aim for the newly erected shelters, rows of half-assembled houses with plank floors and missing roofs. You slip inside one labeled Unit 17, drop your damp blanket on the floor joists, and prepare for sleep. The wind whistles through gaps in the walls, providing a soundtrack of free ambient breeze. You lie back and count the stars visible through the rafters, which doubles as a roof survey. At least 4 leaks expected come rain. In the morning, the inevitable happens. You wake to a splinter in your back and a drizzle of rainwater forming on your cheek. You leap up, yelp, and flop onto your face. This is going to be a long day. You crawl outside, collect your tools, and head toward the rebuilding site, where masons are assembling the first domed church to rise from the ashes. On your way, you're accosted by a group of displaced families, mothers with ragged shawls, children clutching wooden toys, and old men with petitions scrawled on bits of parchment. They recognize you as one of the workers, and beseech you for scraps of timber, nails, anything to patch their own makeshift homes. You look at your meager purse, 3 shillings left. You hand over a copper nail to a wide-eyed child. She grips it like a treasure, and you feel something. Guilt, pride, empathy, none of these fit into your usual survival toolkit, but you tuck the feeling away like a souvenir. Arriving at the site, you notice a new sign, Saint. Ethelberg's reconstruction, skilled labor required. You step in and see Wren himself sketching architraves on parchment. A line of applicants stands nearby. Master carvers, stone cutters, and retired knights with management experience. You fiddle with your trowel handle, then step up to the registration table. The clerk squints. Name? You give your militia rank, private bet, and he flashes a parchment at Wren. Wren nods, and suddenly you're promoted from gutter runner to assistant mason apprentice. You blink. Apprentice? This could mean better wages, or just more trowel wielding under the harsh sun. Nevertheless, you sign up. Your first task, carve mortar channels into a reclaimed granite foundation. You're handed a chisel and mallet, tools heavier than your entire life expectancy in 1666. You chip away, flinching at each reverberation in your skull. Sweat trickles down your spine, and your arms threaten to detach. But after an hour, you stand back and admire a perfectly carved groove. If perfectly means a bit uneven but functional. Wren glances, raises an eyebrow, and murmurs, "Not bad for a beginner." You suppress the urge to strut. By midday, you're hauling dressed stone blocks into place. Jacques appears again, now sporting a courier sash for his timber racket. He salutes, then motions toward a nearby stable. "I've got something you might want to see," he whispers. You follow him through a maze of scaffolding to discover a pile of exotic timbers. Walnut, oak, even a few mahogany scraps. Bought cheap from a shipwrecked merchant, he explains. We'll flip these to the richest gentry. You examine a plank that smells faintly of sea salt and old tobacco. These scruples you can sell as romantic maritime relics. You nod reluctantly. Construction and opportunism have never been strangers. The afternoon sun burns your neck as you return to work. Myriad tasks blur together. Measuring, carving, laying, smoothing. Every so often you catch yourself humming the same absurd refrain. Ashes to ash, bricks to dust. You shudder. No more minstrels for you. Instead, you focus on not dropping a stone on your own foot. As twilight falls, you're assigned to erect the first roof truss of the site. It's a precarious piece of carpentry forged from pre-fire oak. You climb up the ladder, legs wobbling like jelly in a storm. One misstep could send you tumbling to the dirt, or worse, impale you on a stray spike. The foreman, perched higher, barks instructions. Keep it level, tie it tight, mind your head. You nod, swallow, and heave the truss into position. Your heart hammers as you fasten it with wooden pegs. When it's secure, the entire structure groans under its own weight, only to hold firm. You exhale the largest breath you've ever breathed. Your fellow workers cheer. Even Mad Tom gives you a thumbs up, though from his crooked grin you suspect he's planning to nick your trowel when you're not looking. Dusting ash from your brow, you survey the emerging skyline. Rooftops rising like arms reaching for redemption. You feel, dare you say, a spark of pride. London isn't just a pile of charred rubble anymore. It's a city clawing itself back. Night descends. You descend too, stumbling onto the ground, dizzy but exhilarated. Jacques is waiting with 2 full tankards of ale. For bravery, he toasts. You clink and sip, and it actually tastes like triumph. You realize that after all this hellfire, you've built walls, roofs, and maybe even a bit of dignity. Tomorrow, you'll continue carving, leveling, and perhaps smuggling more exotic wood. But for now, you'll sleep on planks that feel sturdier than any mattress you've known in 1666. Before you drift off, you jot a quick note to yourself. Survive, rebuild, profit, repeat. Because if there's one lesson from the Great Fire, it's that Londoners don't just endure. They reinvent themselves out of ash, smoke, and stubborn determination. And so do you. Congratulations. If you made it this far, you've survived not only the inferno, but the reconstruction frenzy, navigated politics, battled gravity on scaffolds, and even dipped a toe into the murky waters of illicit timber trade. That, dear viewer, is the highest form of survival. Thriving in chaos with a smirk on your face and a trowel in your hand. Thanks for joining this epic finale of our Great Fire saga. If you enjoyed watching me nearly fall to my doom, haul angry beams, and out-wrestle drunken masons, smash that like button. Just kidding, you already did that at the start. But do subscribe for more historical nightmares, survival absurdities, and sarcastic misadventures through time. Until next disaster, keep your bricks level and your humor darker than a London alley at midnight. Close up on a trembling hand clutching a cracked clay cup. Blood in the streets, senators scrambling for sandals, barbarian loot boats on the Tiber. Would you make it through Rome's last gasp? Stay tuned, because surviving the fall of the Roman Empire is about to get ugly. Part 1. You wake to the clang of a bronze gong echoing through your domus on the Palatine Hill, the morning sun gilding broken marble columns like the last glimmers of a fading dream. It's 476 AD, give or take a few months, and the Western Empire is gasping its final breath. You lie in your silk-lined bed, a gift from your disgraced uncle, the former Praetorian prefect, but luxury these days just means you'll be robbed more thoroughly. Before you even rise, your slave, Julius, who was once free enough to vote in the Comitia before life got weird, has flung open the curtains and proclaimed, "Dominus, the forum is chaos. Vandals at the gates, and even the pigeons are looting bread." You roll your eyes, pinch the bridge of your nose, and mutter, "Is this a Tuesday or the apocalypse? Hard to tell." You throw on your toga with more holes than a net for tuna fishing and head downstairs, bracing yourself for yet another day in the world's most spectacularly self-destructing empire. In the atrium, the household staff is in pandemonium. Lusitania, your cook who once boiled garum with the precision of an alchemist, is now weeping into a pot of congealed porridge. "The grain shipments from Africa have run dry," she sobs. They say the Vandals took the ships, and now we're down to porridge and wild mushrooms that give you, let's call it Roman roulette. You smell yesterday's mushrooms fermenting in a corner and decide that hunger today is preferable to whatever else that fungus might offer. You barrel through to your private peristyle garden, where a few withered citrus trees cling to life like senators clinging to Senate seats. You grab a half-rotten orange, fling it at a pigeon looting your fava beans, and watch it wobble off with a stunned, "Coo!" That's one less scavenger to worry about, avian or otherwise. Outside, the city is a tinderbox. The great aqueducts are leaking like ruptured veins. Fountains sputter ash instead of water, and the once glorious Via Sacra is strewn with rubble and the occasional corpse. You dodge a centurion recruiting new soldiers, offering 3 years' service and a chance to fight for what remains of Rome. You've seen how those 3 years turn out. Either you end up dead in Gaul, or you return with a new barbarian accent and a taste for mead. You wave him off. I already fight enough battles against debt collectors and insurrectionist geese, thank you. Your first goal, secure reliable food. You navigate the winding alleys toward the foreign marketplace, where vendors hawk relics of better days, shards of marble labeled authentic, if by authentic you mean pulled from my neighbor's wall, rusted gladi marketed as battle-tested, and wine so thin it would embarrass a vineyard's toddler. You negotiate for a loaf of bread the size of your palm, trading a silver denarius in your dignity. The baker, once content to charge a penny for a loaf, snarls, "That's the going rate, citizen. Inflation's real." This from someone who's still using the same scales that missed the fall of the Republic. Bread in hand, you retire to the steps of the Temple of Saturn, where you perch next to old Marcus, a veteran who was at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge and still carries a limp as a souvenir. He gnaws on your offered loaf like it's manna from Jupiter himself. Between bites, he grumbles, "They say Odoacres in Ravenna, emperor in name but barked orders like a dog." Next thing you know, the Senate will be selling senatorial seats on the internet. You laugh until you realize that line might be prophetic. Your next stop, information. You weave through crowds gathered around an impromptu platform, where an orator declaims in a voice hoarse as the Danube in winter. "Fellow Romans, our empire crumbles, our coffers emptied by Eastern gold seekers, our legions paid in broken promises. Will we stand idle as the barbarians claim our eagle standards?" The crowd cheers, though mostly because the speaker is more coherent than most news these days. You lean in, trying to catch the name of the next rebellion, the price of grain in Hispania, or whether the moat around Ravenna still holds water. Instead, you overhear someone whisper, "Just wait till the Huns show up." You picture Attila in full war paint, actually more fashionable than the current Senate plunderers, and shiver, spatula of half-baked porridge still in hand. You decide it's time to get serious about survival. Option 1. Join a band of mercenaries heading north to fend off Gothic incursions. They promise land, plunder, and a guaranteed exit strategy, assuming you survive Gaul. Option 2. Hole up in a villa on Lake Como, living off wares stolen from the rich with a small cadre of disillusioned senators. You imagine nights of campfires, wine, and telling bad jokes to Germanic recruits who think virtues means fart jokes. Option 3. Sneak aboard a merchant galley bound for Byzantium, where they still fancy themselves emperors and have better food if you can stomach the seasickness. Before you pick, you need supplies. You head to the docks, where the merchant ships list like zombies by the quay. A crusty sea captain beckons you over. Gold or muscle? You weigh your coin pouch, fatter than your biceps, and smirk. Muscle. He grins, revealing a grin that could star in a horror show, and hands you a gladius with enough nicks to count each battle scar. "Sign your name here," he says, brandishing a scroll thicker than a tax collector's patience. You sign, remembering that your handwriting was better before the purple toga days. Instant sailor, or so the contract says. Next, you need allies. You wander to the baths of Caracalla, where the remaining patricians soak in lukewarm water, when it still flows, gossiping like pen-pushing senators. You overhear 2 matrons bemoaning tatters of silk and vanishing dowries. You decide to recruit one, Faustina, widow of a disgraced senator, savvy with contacts in the Senate and rumored to have hidden jewels under her floorboards. You approach her amid the steam and broken statues. She squints at your toga and asks, Survivor or opportunist? You flash a roguish grin. Bit of both. She cackles, drips water on your shoes, and agrees. If you help reclaim her family's estates, she'll fund your voyage to Byzantium. Deal struck. As midday sun turns the ruins into a furnace, you realize the city's heat rivals its political climate. You duck into the basilica for shade, where a Christian preacher is converting looters one admonition at a time. Repent, ye plunderers, for pillaging the relics of saints earns you nothing but divine disapproval. His words echo. You glance at your new gladius. The blade looks perfect for relic theft. You stain your conscience with broth of moral ambiguity, shrug and retreat before he can baptize you. By afternoon, you're armed with bread, alliances, and a questionable cause. It's time to test the waters, literally. You trudge back to the docks, where your sea captain assigns you a hammock on the lower deck, below the bilge. You climb aboard, clutch your meager belongings, and sip the slops of stale wine that pass for viticulture these days. The ship creaks, groans, and lurches as sailors haul ropes and curse the late winds. You wonder if this voyage will end in glory or if you'll wash ashore on some barbarian beach, exposed in ways no toga could ever cover. As twilight falls, the captain orders the sails hoisted. You stand at the rail, watching Rome's silhouette shrink into a haze of smoke and memory. The city you once loved, towers of marble, form of discourse, streets paved with the bones of your ancestors, is fading behind you, replaced by the open sea and an uncertain future. You feel the weight of history on your shoulders, centuries of triumph now flirting with oblivion. You settle into your hammock, ears filled with the ship's creaks and the distant flapping of canvas like frantic applause. Sleep beckons, but caution snarls. The chances of pirates, storms, or mutiny might be higher than the odds the Byzantine Welcome Committee has a decent buffet. Still, you decide to rest. For tomorrow, you'll face new challenges, stormy seas, strange tongues, and perhaps the marvels of Constantinople, where emperors still claim to be gods. But for now, you doze off, lulled by the water's sway and contemplating the ultimate question. Can one truly survive the end of an empire? And if you do, what becomes of a survivor when the world they knew is ash and ruin? Tune in next time for part 2, where we tackle pirate skirmishes in the Tyrrhenian Sea, barter with peasant traders who take pride in overcharging Romans, and sneak past Byzantine customs with more bribes than your uncle's last will. Will you survive the voyage east or become just another tale whispered in a Constantinople tavern? Find out soon. Same historical nightmare, same sarcastic disaster. You awake below deck to the pungent aroma of salt, sweat, and rotting fish. The hammock creaks like a cranky toddler, and above, the sea captain barks, "Up and at 'em, landlubber!" Breakfast grog and yesterday's hardtack. You swing your legs over the rail, scrape your boots on the deck, and nearly face plant into a barrel marked fresh water. A lie, as anyone who's ever tasted it could confirm. You grab a piece of hardtack that could double as a doorstop, crunch it with the enthusiasm of a man auditioning for Roman gladiator who eats anything, and swallow a mouthful of brine-flavored grog. Today's goal: survive pirates, storms, and Byzantine customs without losing your head or your wallet. Morning light reveals the Tyrrhenian Sea, which is a glorious sheet of turquoise if you squint and ignore the ominous black clouds gathering on the horizon. The crew hoists sail. You clap together your soggy hands for warmth. Nearby, a pair of sailors belch sea shanties about Neptune's wrath, each lyric more off-key than the last. You tuck your gladius into its sheath and peek over the rail, spotting the craggy outline of Corsica. "Land!" cries the lookout, and you blink. This close, the island looks like a giant moss-covered promontory about to trip you on your way to greatness. Your captain, a grizzled veteran of one too many bar brawls, calls you over. "You handle the jib lines today," he orders, shoving a coil of rope into your arms. "If we lose control of the sail in a storm, we're all fish food." You nod solemnly, despite never having touched a jib line in your life. You wrap the rope around your forearm and imagine you've done this since childhood. 10 seconds later, the sail snaps in a sudden gust, yanking your arm and nearly yanking you overboard. You scream, the rope slips, and for a moment you're airborne, then thud, face first onto the deck. The crew erupts into laughter. You dust off, rub your nose, and mutter, "Professional line handler," they said. "Earn your salt," they said. No sooner have you righted yourself than the sky darkens. Thunder rumbles like a colossal centurion clearing his throat. The captain shouts, "Storm's on us! Batten down the hatches!" The crew scrambles, you scurry to help, but trip on a coil of rope and land in a barrel of salted cod. You emerge smelling like a fishmonger's dream and nightmare. The captain grins. "You smell like victory, lad." Victory tastes like salted fish and humiliation. Rain begins in earnest, drumming on the deck like 1,000 tiny drumbeats heralding doom. Waves rise like angry elephants, tossing the ship until you feel like a toy in some cosmic bathtub. You clutch the rail, white-knuckled, and pray to every Roman god you can name. Jupiter, Neptune, Mercury, for swift passage, even Bacchus, for courage or a good drunk later. Water sweeps across the deck. You dodge it like a gladiator avoiding a charging opponent. Someone slips past you, you yelp, catch them by the tunic, and in a desperate wrestling match, both of you topple into a pile of rigging. You disentangle yourself, soaked to the bone, and realize the storm will either break the ship or break your spirit. You choose to stay optimistic until a giant wave crashes over the side and baptizes you in salt water. The storm lasts for hours, or perhaps days, time blurring like the horizon between sky and sea. At long last, the rain slackens, the thunder retreats, and the waves subside into thrashing calves. The ship lists precariously, but remains afloat. You crawl back up to the quarterdeck, looking like Poseidon's laundry. The captain surveys the damage, torn sail, snapped mast ropes, and soggy supplies that may or may not kill you faster than pirates. He assesses your soaked form and nods. Not dead yet. That's half the battle. You grin, though most of your face is salt-crusted, and echo, half the battle. You spend the next hours patching the sail with spare canvas, bailing water, and swearing to never mock the sea again, until you inevitably do. As the sun sets, a rainbow arcs across the sky promising safe passage. You treat it like a celestial "we survived" banner and feel a spark of hope. Tomorrow, pirates or fair winds, whichever comes first. Night passes without incident, save for Private Bumble's snoring echoing through the hull. Morning dawns calm, the sea a gentle lullaby. The captain announces, "Land ho! Calabria." You rush to the rail and spy the Italian coastline. A rugged panorama of olive groves, crumbling watchtowers, and villages perched on cliffs as if to mock your sea-weary soul. You smell opportunity, fresh food, shady taverns, and possibly information about Constantinople's welcome committees. You prepare to disembark, but first, customs. At the port of Reggio, a half-dozen uniformed officials await, clipboard in hand. "Declare your cargo," they demand. Jacques, who sneaked aboard as a courier of exotic timbers, steps forward, attempting a bribe with a handful of smuggled walnuts. The customs officer sniffs, flicks the walnuts aside like rotting grapes, and says, "That won't do, sir." "Where's your manifest?" Jacques stammers. You step in, brandish your official merchant scroll, and say, "Everything's in order, just routine inspections, right?" The officer's eyes narrow. "See that it is. We'll be watching." He stamps your papers with an ominous thud. You exhale. Off the ship, you stretch your legs on terra firma, terracotta more like. Every joint creaks. You eyeball the port tavern, where smoke drifts out of the door like gossip escaping the walls. Inside, fishermen gossip about the latest vandal raids, merchants haggle over amber, and a blind harper strums a mournful tune about broken empires. You slip to the bar, order grilled sardines and a mug of diluted wine, then sink into a stool. The sardines are crispy, smoky, and possibly poisonous, but they're better than hardtack. You savor each bite, pat your bulging purse of coins, and plan your next move. Your goal: reach Brindisi by next week, board the fastest galley to Constantinople, and avoid becoming dinner fodder. But first, you need reliable transport, and a local guide who speaks Greek. You overhear a pair of merchants discussing a guide named Demetrios, who reportedly escorts travelers east for a modest fee of 20 gold solidu. You approach them, flash a grin, looking for safe passage to the east. They glance at your worn tunic and cracked cup, then at the gold glinting in your purse. "Follow us," they say. They lead you down a narrow alley lined with stalls selling olives so black they could be burnt offerings and pottery engraved with scenes of long-dead emperors. You arrive at a modest house behind a wooden door. Inside, Demetrios, tall, bearded, and dressed in a linen robe, welcomes you with a solemn nod. He measures your purse, eyes you up and down, then says, 20 solidi up front, and no tricks. I know the seas, I know the land routes. I can get you to Constantinople in 3 weeks, if the gods allow. You count the coins in your hand, enough to feed you, profit Jacques, and maybe bribe a customs officer or two, and nod. Deal sealed with a handshake that feels like a pickpocket's parry. Now equipped with a guide, you set out overland toward Brindisi, traveling by mule along dusty Roman roads that have seen better days. You clutch your gladius as a comfort object. At night, you camp beside crumbling milestones proclaiming distances to Rome, each one a reminder that home is farther than you'd hoped. You pass through villages where young boys sell goat cheese and old women rock in chairs, cackling at the world's end. They point at you, a dusty stranger with city airs, and call out, "Roma? Where's your empire now?" You smile politely, hand over a denarius for cheese, and move on before they can demand reparations. After days of sunburn, blisters, and mosquitoes the size of sparrows, you arrive at Brundisium. The port bustles, merchants loading amphorae of olive oil, travelers screaming about lost passports, i.e. stamped papyri, and pickpockets scoping out your pockets for denarii. You locate Demetrios' contact, the captain of a sleek Byzantine droman known as the Golden Phoenix. He's a bald man with one cow's tooth over his lip and a scar that suggests a past disagreement with a sword. He eyes your purse, grunts, then nods approval at Demetrios' guarantee. On board, the captain assigns you quarters near the bow, where the sea spray is freshest and the deck least stable. You unpack your belongings, stale bread, a clandestine vial of Roman oil, and enough courage to last the voyage. Demetrios hands you a simple lesson. Listen for the watchman's horn at midnight. If pirates attack, head to the center of the ship and guard the hold, and don't talk to the Byzantine soldiers. They bite. You nod, tuck the oil in your sash, and wonder why anything good ever happens without a catch. The ship sets sail at dawn, rowers straining in unison as oars cut through glassy water. You settle in for the Adriatic crossing, a week of sea, sky, and unsolicited advice from Demetrios about Byzantine politics. He recites gossip. Emperor Leo's niece is plotting rebellion, the patriarch selling indulgences by the gallon, and the church bell tolls every hour because no one can afford a clock. You nod along, dubious but entertained. Meanwhile, the sea remains calm, birds follow in your wake, and for a moment, the world feels less like burning ruins and more like a grand adventure. On day 4, though, the sea turns mischievous. A gale whips up, whipping waves into frothy beasts that slam the hull. You grasp the rail, stomach churning like a mortar churned by a mad Roman engineer. Rowers strain, the captain barks orders in Greek. Demetrios shouts in Latin, "Hold fast." You clamp your gladius to your side and pray you won't be swept overboard. After all, that'd be a lousy way to end a midlife crisis. Night falls, lightning cracks overhead, and you wonder if Mercury can deliver a better weather forecast. The storm rages, thunder rattles your bones, and you huddle by the mast wet as a drowned rat and twice as miserable. You remind yourself that if you survive this, you'll have more bragging rights than any centurion with a dozen campaigns under his belt. Eventually, the storm relents. The Golden Phoenix emerges battered but afloat, and the dawn reveals a sky of bruised violet. The crew cheers, proof that any day you're alive is a good one. You manage a grin, though your teeth chatter, and survey the damage. Broken rigging, torn sails, and a small pool of vomit at your feet. You clean your boots, right your hammock, and steel yourself for the final leg to Constantinople. As the ship rounds the Peloponnesian coast, you glimpse distant minarets and domes rising from the haze like promises. Tomorrow, you'll dock in a city where emperors still claim divinity, spices perfume the air, and new dangers lurk behind every gilded portal. You've survived Romans, pirates, storms, customs, and doubt. What could possibly go wrong? Tune in next time for part 3, where we navigate the labyrinthine streets of Byzantium, haggle with eunuch officials, dodge political assassins in marbled courtyards, and discover whether your Roman grit can stand up to Greek bureaucracy. Until then, keep your gladius sharp and your humor sharper. Survival may depend on it. The morning sun filters through painted shutters as you awake in your modest lodgings in Constantinople, formerly the New Rome, now a glittering maze of reeking alleyways, marmoreal colonnades, and exotic spices that smell like someone sneakily poured curry into the imperial bathwater. Your guide, Demetrios, has already left to conduct official errands, which you suspect involve bribing customs officers with Byzantine coins stamped with the emperor's bearded mug. You haul yourself from the creaky cot, stretched joints still ache from the Adriatic gale, and prepare to tackle the world's most complicated city bureaucracy without losing your wits, or your purse. By 8 a.m., you're navigating the great hippodrome's shadow, where chariot races once thundered like a herd of stampeding elephants. Now, half the seats are empty, half are filled with disgruntled charioteers demanding back pay, and the floor is littered with broken spindles and more seeds than a peacock's tail. You sidestep a gang of Arbonite supporters, a rabble of leather-clad youth hurling insults in broken Greek at a rival faction wearing teal scarves, and wonder if factional riots count as acceptable morning entertainment. You duck into a side street, sneak a glance at a sign proclaiming Official Registry of Foreign Residents, and steel yourself for paperwork worthy of Hercules' labors. Inside, a queue of disgruntled foreigners, Persians, Goths, Sicilians, and one rather suspicious-looking eunuch clutching a ledger, wraps around marble pillars. Scribes scrawl names in a rush, their quills scratching like deranged grasshoppers. You approach the counter and present your scroll. Roman citizens recently arrived via the Golden Phoenix. The clerk peers over horn-rimmed spectacles, then at your gladius strapped improbably at your side. Purpose of stay? She demands, ink dripping from her pen like a vengeful squid. You clear your throat. Trade, then flash the smallest pouch of solidity you've saved, and maybe a little adventure. The clerk accepts the bribe as though it were church offerings, stamps your parchment with a flourish, and waves you through. Victory. Now you officially exist on Byzantine soil, just in time for the next heap of regulations. Hungry for sustenance, you follow the smell of sizzling meat to a tavern offering secret imperial delicacies. Inside, the proprietor, a stout man with a handlebar mustache, slides you a plate of lamb skewers dripping with honey and sesame. You bite in and feel like a god who briefly misplaced his ambrosia. Between chews, you overhear two merchants debating a cargo of Arabian camels bound for the palace menagerie. You imagine the chaos when camels rip through palace corridors, looking for fresh hay. That's the kind of calamity you'd pay to witness. Re-energized, you set out to explore the Grand Bazaar, a labyrinth of stalls so vast that you half expect to emerge in another continent. You weave past carpets woven with impossible geometries, silver trinkets shaped like Byzantine crosses, and vendors hawking jars of Jupiter's best olives, which taste exactly like brine-drowned pebbles. A seller with a thick accent offers you a vial of dragon's breath perfume, guaranteed to clear lungs and punch the nose of any rival suitor. You bargain fiercely, but in the end it's still overpriced. You pocket it anyway. Desperate times call for potent fragrances. Your mission today: locate an audience with a minor court official to plead for protection as a Roman entrepreneur, thereby securing safe passage to lucrative silk routes. You consult your dusty map, inked by Demetrios in the flicker of a single candle, and plot a course to the Blachernae district, where lesser nobility reside in sprawling mansions overlooking the Golden Horn. Each mansion seems guarded by soldiers sporting armor polished to mirror sheen. You approach the first gate, present your stamped residency scroll, and are met with a stern name and business. You squint, realize you've forgotten the official's name, and improvise. I come on behalf of Senator Faustina's investments in nut frontier markets. They let you pass, perhaps because they assume any mention of Faustina implies serious coin. Inside the courtyard, dancing fountains spray water like rococo chandeliers, and peacocks strut on marble balustrades. You hear the faint squeak of a folding chair as the official rises to greet you, a lean man with a hawk's nose and a sneer that suggests he's allergic to pleasantries. You bow deeply, pressing your sandals to the mosaic floor, and declare, "Esteemed Hypatius, I humbly present goods and ideas to enrich your estates and strengthen the empire's commerce." His right eyebrow twitches. "You have 20 words or less," he says. You condense your proposal. Roman olive oil, Gothic furs, and an exclusive trade lane avoiding Slavic bandits. He nods once, crisply, then dismisses you. Not exactly a glowing endorsement, but he tears off a slip of parchment. Permission to trade in Chalcedon. Watch out for customs. Small victory. As you exit, you almost collide with a veiled figure, probably a spy for a rival court faction, who whispers, "Beware the eunuch in the great palace. He collects secrets like coins." Intrigued, you file that under to investigate later and stride toward the landward docks, where Chalcedon's vessels bustle. You secure a small yawl bound for the eastern suburbs, a modest craft whose captain promises a stable crew and minimal risk of pirate boards. You pay in debased coin and hop aboard, finding space between crates of saffron and amphorae of pearls. The muffled chatter of sailors and the lapping water lull you into a confident mood. You've navigated bureaucracy, brokered trade rights, and survived 3 days in Byzantium without being executed for cultural insensitivity. That's gotta count as progress. But no sooner have the oars dipped than you realize you've forgotten to secure lodging for tonight. The eastern suburbs lie beyond the city's protective walls, an area of artisans, unruly markets, and occasional pickpockets with poetry ambitions. The captain shrugs. Find your own shelter, we dock at dusk, eh? You swallow. At least you have the shaky trade permission slip. Perhaps it can double as lodging collateral. You disembark at a rickety quay where fishermen mend nets stained with fish blood and gasoline. No, wait, this is 476 AD, so fish blood alone. You wander into a narrow street lined with stucco houses leaning at improbable angles. A gingerbread aroma catches your attention, a bakery still standing amid crumbling shops. You step inside. The baker eyes you warily, holding a wooden paddle with a dusty loaf perched on it. You offer your Chalcedon permit. He squints. What's that for? You explain you'll spend coin in his district, trade license to ensure fair commerce. He strokes his beard, decides it's convincing enough, and hands you half a loaf and a small jug of watered-down wine. On the house, for a new face. You bless him, pay a draconian tip, and exit with stomach warm for the first time in days. Night falls, and the eastern quarter takes on a different life. Lanterns flicker, children shout in a medley of tongues, and stray cats negotiate turf in Spanish whispers. You choose a modest inn, a stucco facade with 2 rooms upstairs and a sign reading, "Rooms for honest travelers only." Inside, you climb a narrow staircase, grab the last available bedchamber, and settle in. The mattress is a lumpy sack of chaff, but you cover it with your woolen cloak for cushioning. You sink onto the mattress, savoring the fact that your back will only protest tomorrow, not tonight. As you drift towards sleep, you contemplate the day's triumphs and foibles, stamped scrolls, honeyed lamb, bureaucratic near misses, and the sly wink of Hypatius that suggests potential future favors, for a price. Demetrios will return by dawn, eager to lead you further afield, perhaps to the silk merchants of Antioch or the spice routes of Arabia. But for now, you close your eyes, lulled by the distant calls of night watchmen and the whispered lullaby of a city whose greatness surges on at the whim of emperors, eunuchs, and opportunistic wanderers like yourself. Surviving Constantinople's wild heart is no small feat. You've dodged political assassinations, navigated Byzantine paperwork, bartered olives and loaves, and avoided getting Byzantinized, whatever that means. Tomorrow, in Part 4, we'll tackle the final trials. Smuggling precious cargo past Saracen patrols, negotiating with silk magnates wielding poison goblets, and hopefully making it back to a safe corner of the empire, with enough coin to avoid dining on goose droppings. So rest up. Your Roman roots may be ancient, but your survival instincts are sharper than any gladius you've ever wielded. See you at dawn, when the next chapter of imperial absurdity unfolds. Dawn breaks over Constantinople like an overacted pageant. Bright banners flutter on battered walls, merchant stalls squeak open their shutters, and a faint melody drifts from some distant mosque's minaret call. You roll out of your rustic straw mattress, muscles still singing a dirge for every hardtack and salted sardine you've ever swallowed. Today, you're on a mission. Smuggle your precious cargo of Gothic furs, Roman olive oil, and Demetrios's exotic timber past Saracen patrols, ink-side eunuchs, and Byzantine toll collectors, while somehow pocketing enough solid to avoid becoming a court jester for a minor despot. Breakfast is a pitiful affair. A crust of blackened bread scrounged from last night's communal basket, and a cup of burnt coffee-like concoction brewed by the innkeeper. a grizzled Turk named Mehmet who insists his shehir coffee is the cure for seal, sickness, insomnia, and existential dread. You slug it down, wince, but feel oddly prepared for the day's absurdities. Mehmet winks. If you survive today, you'll tell stories 500 years from now. You nod, choking. That's the plan. At the quay, Demetrios awaits, juggling a map of trading routes and several greasy olives in one hand. Ah, survivor of bureaucracy and gale storms. Ready for the final stretch? He waves you toward a small galley moored in the shadow of the Hagia Sophia. Its hull bears the sigil of a trading consortium known for running blockade jobs, an odd mix of reputable merchants and retired corsairs. You step aboard, noting the carved dragon head prow grinning at you as if in on the joke. Captain Eleni, a retired pirate queen turned merchant skipper, greets you with crossed arms and a grin missing a front tooth. You've got goods? She rumbles. You present your permits from Hypatius and the custom slip from Reggio, then discreetly slide a leather pouch of bribes across the deck. She inspects the coins, nods, and taps the hold hatch. Load fast. Saracen dows cruise these waters. If they board us, they'll take everything not nailed down. You help carry crates of olive oil, slippery as eels, and bundles of timber scented like smoked oak. Each box you lift feels like another excuse to develop a hernia, but you dig in, driven by visions of silk-threaded purses. By mid-morning, the hold is full. You retreat to the deck, breathing air that smells of sea salt and opportunity. The galley's oarsmen flex powerful backs as they row you eastward into the Sea of Marmara. Above, the city's skyline recedes. The Golden Horn twinkles, domes shrink to dots, and the Bosporus narrows like a river drawing you toward Asia. You pat your loincloth pocket, pleased to hear the jingle of Solidi still safe. Just as you loosen your tunic for comfort, a lookout's cry pierces the air. Sails on the horizon. You squint, 3 dhows cutting through the waves, dark shapes bristling with oars and armed men. Saracen pirates likely seeking spoils to fund their own grand plans. Captain Eleni barks commands. Hard to port, lower the sails, oars to the water. You scramble to help uncoil spare lines, heart pounding like a war drum. The first dhow closes fast, its crew leaps to boarding ropes drawn by the call of easy plunder. The galley's traders shriek for muskets, scattered among you like party favors, and fire-warning shots that whiz overhead. You grip your gladius, torn between instinct to run and ironic pride in defending your contraband. The pirate ship collides with the galley's hull. Men drop grappling hooks, and a shudder runs through the planks. Suddenly, you're in the melee. A Saracen boards beside you, scimitar raised. You duck, tumble backward, and stab at his ankle, rather inelegantly, but effectively, sending him stumbling into the deck railing. He curses in Arabic. You reply with hearty Latin taunts. Captain Eleni fights 2 pirates at once, her cutlass singing as it deflects blows. Demetrios cowers behind a barrel, hurling olives at attackers like improvised grenades. The scene is chaos in full technicolor. Moments, or lifetimes, later, the boarding ropes slacken. The pirates pull back, perhaps wary of your ragtag defense or distracted by another skirmish on the starboard bow. Captain Eleni slams the galley's prow into the attacking dhow, the impact echoing like thunder. You seize the moment, sprint to the helm, and help steer the ship away from danger. Oarsmen strain, pulling you speedily toward the wider safe waters of the Marmara. Blood pumps adrenaline through your veins as the last dhow retreats. You lean on the rail, panting, half wondering if you'll get applauded or reprimanded for surviving so clumsily. Instead, Captain Eleni offers a single nod, the highest praise on the high seas. Demetrios emerges, olive-stained but triumphant. "Well fought, Roman," he says, handing you a fresh, squeezed citron water to wash the salt and sweat away. You gulp gratefully, promising yourself to brush your teeth later. No rest for the wicked, though. The wind shifts, birthing ominous clouds that darken the horizon like an incoming Roman tax bill. A storm may yet claim you, but for now, you have a new worry. Byzantine patrols near the Dardanelles. If they catch you with unregistered timber or unauthorized furs, they'll impound your goods, confiscate your coins, and likely conscript you into a lifetime of oar pulling. You secure your cargo below deck, hiding the most suspicious crates under sacks labeled spices, imperial tax paid, and hope the ruse fools any cursory inspection. By afternoon, you sight the ancient city of Troy, far off in the mist, a ghostly reminder of legendary sieges. Captain Alani steers close enough for a glimpse of crumbling ramparts, but not close enough for you to roam. You settle for solemn nod. Next time, maybe, you murmur. Demetrios jots a note. Visit site, stage selfie with Trojan horse. He barely hides his glee at the marketing potential. As the sun sank low, you round Cape Helles and enter the narrow strait. The Dardanelles glint like silver ribbon, flanked by steep shores dotted with watchtowers. You breathe sharp air, fresh water from nearby springs filtering down, and brace for the final gambit, docking in Abydos, where local officials levy steep tariffs on suspected contraband. Captain Alani signals the oarsmen to soften their approach. You stand ready to charm, or bribe, your way through. Abydos' pier is a jumble of fishing boats, merchant junks, and official patrol barges. You step off onto sun-bleached planks, heart hammering with each uneven board. Across the jetty, a pair of imperial inspectors lean against spears, clipboard in hand. Their armor gleams like polished silver. Their expressions are colder than the Thracian winters. You straighten your tunic, slightly damp from splashover, clutch your permit dossier, and square your shoulders. Time to earn your solidi. State your business, one inspector demands in clipped Greek. You bow deeply. I am here to deliver olive oil and timber to the governor's storehouse, per imperial decree. You present stamped papers from Hypatius and the maritime permit signed by Alani's consortium. He frowns, flicks through your scrolls, then asks, "Any other goods?" You hesitate. If you mention furs and oil beyond the official quota, they'll confiscate half. You decide on honesty. Also, a small consignment of fine Gothic furs intended for the palace wardrobes. Their eyes light up, and not with appreciation. "Customs due," the second inspector intones. 40% tariff. Your heart sinks. 40% of your crown jewels would be less painful. You flash a rueful grin. You mentally calculate. Medically, you can't part with that much. You need at least 20 solidi to live for another month. I propose a compromise, esteemed sirs, 20% now, and I will return the favor with additional cargo on my next voyage. You slide a smaller bribe across the desk, a pouch containing half the demanded tariff. He sniffs, then pockets it with a slight nod. 40% plus 20 solid isn't a compromise, you mutter under your breath, but he seems satisfied. Paper signed, seal stamped, you're legally and illegally clear to proceed. Freedom never felt so expensive. You haul your crates past the inspector's suspicious glances and deliver them to the governor's warehouse, where porters gratefully unload oil that smells like sunshine and furs plush enough to dry imperial tears. You collect your receipt, thank the porters with a few coins, and slip away before they discover the hidden parcels of timber you tucked behind pigskin drums. Heart pounding, you melt into the narrow alleys of Abydos, triumph and relief flooding your every nerve. Evening finds you reunited with Captain Alani and Demetrios at a seaside tavern, where a local chorus serenades travelers with sea shanties so mournful they border on philosophical treatise. You toast to survival, clinking mugs of spiced wine, and nurse your battered pride alongside wounds only slightly more severe than your finances. Demetrios raises a slice of honey-drizzled flatbread. To the indomitable spirit of the Roman survivor, he toasts. You lift your mug. "And to whoever invented debt," you add, and the table erupts in laughter. As twilight fades, you gaze east across the water toward what was once the heart of Hellespont lore, now a corridor to the rest of the Byzantine world. Tomorrow you'll navigate overland routes through Mysia, perhaps find more lucrative markets in Nicaea, and avoid the looming shadow of the Seljuk Turks. But for this night, you let the waves' lullaby wash away your weariness. You have survived collapsing empires, gale-tossed seas, pirate ambushes, Byzantine red tape, and ravenous inspectors. That, dear viewer, is what it means to endure the fall of Rome and rise on the ashes of its successor. So here we stand at the end of our epic odyssey, you, a seasoned survivor, and me, your sarcastic guide through history's darkest corridors. If by some miracle you're still with us, breathing, blinking, maybe even smiling, press like, subscribe, and join the legion of time travelers who relish the absurdity of survival. Drop a comment telling us which calamity was your favorite. privateer swordplay, inspector extortion, or storm-driven faceplants. Until next time, keep your gladius sharp, your humor sharper, and remember, empires may fall, but survivors write the legends. Farewell, and may your next disaster be just as delightfully chaotic. Close-up of a gloved hand tracing the Titanic's name on polished brass. Imagine a floating palace hurtling through the icy Atlantic, champagne flowing, violins playing, and doom waiting just below deck. Would you outwit fate or become another statistic on her maiden voyage? Buckle up, your Titanic survival guide starts now. Part 1. You step aboard RMS Titanic at Southampton docks on a crisp April afternoon in 1912, suitcase in hand and confidence in overdrive. The gangway looms like a promise of grandeur. 6 decks of mahogany railings, chandeliers begging for selfies, and enough gilt to make Versailles blush. You flash your first-class ticket to the swarthy porter, who already knows your name because everyone here paid enough to be personally memorized, and stride into a world where etiquette manuals double as life preservers. Except, spoiler alert, those life preservers are in short supply. Your first order of business, explore your cabin. You push open the door to find a cozy 2-berth stateroom with white linen beds that look like inviting clouds, a vanity mirror framed in gold, and a brass telephone hooked up to room service, which you'll test rigorously later. You toss your coat onto a plush chair, adjust your monocle, if you're wearing one, and gaze out the porthole at a seagull mocking you from a rusty bollard. You can almost taste the fresh sea breeze, just enough to mask the stench of coal smoke drifting up from the engine rooms far below. Hungry already, you descend to the a la carte restaurant on B deck, where the maître d' greets you with a flourish that nearly dislocates your shoulder. You splurge on consommé, oysters Rockefeller, beef Wellington, peas à la française, and a decadent strawberry ice dessert. Each course arrives with a fanfare worthy of a coronation, and you nibble delicately until a passing steward refills your plate before you can blink. By course 4, you loosen your waistcoat, and by course 6, you're half reclining in your chair, contemplating the wisdom of starting the trip with a feast that rivals a medieval banquet. Digesting and regretting your meal, you wander up to the boat deck for a breath of fresh air. You lean against the rail, watch the passengers promenading, and overhear a shipping magnate boasting about Titanic's watertight compartments. Practically unsinkable, he says. You nod sagely, then tuck that phrase away like a lucky rabbit's foot. Better to believe it now before it mortifies you later. A sudden announcement crackles over the ship's loudspeaker. Ice warnings have been received from the Coronia. All officers advised to maintain a sharp lookout. You glance skyward where a handful of seagulls circle overhead, blissfully unaware of the iceberg threat. You shrug. Surely an iceberg hitting Titanic is like a mosquito biting an elephant. Technically possible, but practically absurd. Late afternoon finds you in the first-class lounge, an ornate room trimmed in oak, with decorative panels depicting classical myth. A quartet is warming up in the corner, their violins promising to play your favorite waltzes into the wee hours. You sink into an overstuffed armchair, sip a glass of iced punch, and journal about your grand voyage. Plans to rub elbows with nobility, toast the new world with American tycoons, and perhaps conduct a brief reconnaissance of third class. Accommodations, purely for educational purposes, education calls at dusk. You slip down to E-deck to visit the steerage passengers, a bustling hive of immigrants clutching tin trunks and dreams of Ellis Island. The air here is warmer, redolent of cabbage soup and perspiration. Families huddle around tables playing cards. Children chase each other among stacked wooden crates. Men smoke coarse cigarettes and trade stories of lands they hope to leave behind. You greet them politely, try a cup of thin pea soup, and decide that if you ever have to survive on rations, you now know precisely what bare necessity tastes like. Returning to first class, you change into evening attire, tailcoat for gentlemen, beaded gown for ladies, and join the dinner crowd in the grand dining saloon. A vaulted ceiling arches above you, glittering with electric lights. The menu features quail, duckling, and curried partridge, dishes you didn't even know existed. You laugh when a fellow passenger asks for something to settle the stomach, and the waiter offers fresh mint tea. If mint could ward off torpedoes, you joke, we'd all be safe. After dinner, you head to the a la carte bar for a nightcap. The bar's polished mahogany glows under gas lamps. The bartender shakes cocktails with the flair of a vaudevillian. You sample a Ritz Fizz and a washerwoman, each named after exotic locales, though neither will protect you from frostbite or panic. You strike up a conversation with an elderly spinster who reminds you that Titanic's maiden voyage is a once-in-a-lifetime affair. One must seize the moment, she declares, clutching a dainty champagne coupe. You nod, clink glasses, and mentally prepare to seize every luxury this ship can offer, unaware that the greatest test of your mettle lies not in elegance but in icy chaos. Midnight arrives with a flourish of chimes. You saunter onto the deck to brush cold air against your heated cheeks, an excellent remedy for overindulgence. Above you, the stars are pinpricks on black velvet. The ocean is calm, like a vast mirror reflecting the ship's lights. You stretch, petulant at the lack of wind, and think, this ship sails smoother than a horse-drawn carriage on marble road. You laugh, then shiver and pull your coat tight. Suddenly, a jarring tremor runs through Titanic's hull, a thunderclap so soft it seems imaginary. The musicians hush. A murmur ripples across the decks. You glance at the officers on the bridge, who stare through binoculars into the darkness. One of them whispers into a telephone, then jabs a finger at the chart table. You catch the words ice field and course adjustment, and your heart flutters like a startled sparrow. In the next corridor, you overhear a lookout's urgent report. Iceberg right ahead. Before you can process, the ship heaves as if nudged by an enormous hand. A metallic screech fills the air, steel tearing steel. Plates on the wall vibrate. A chandelier sends a shower of sparks. For a heartbeat, nothing moves. Then panic unravels decorum faster than spilled champagne. You sprint toward the grand staircase, dodge a trio of startled debutantes clutching beaded handbags, and emerge onto the boat deck. Lifeboats are being lowered, crew shouting orders you barely understand. You glance down. The sea is a dark void, and a glacial mass slides by so close you can almost feel its chill through your shoes. You realize this is no drill. Titanic is wounded, and you, dear viewer, must choose. Cling to etiquette until the end, or abandon protocol and fight like your life depends on it. Because it does. This is where your predicament truly begins. Do you dash for a lifeboat, trust in your privilege to save you first, or bargain passage and steerage with a lifebuoy clasped between desperate hands? In part 2, we'll follow your frantic scramble. The scramble through pitch-black corridors, the barter for a spot on a tiered lifeboat, and the agonizing choice between right and survival. Will your silver spoon buy you safety, or will the Atlantic cold mock every ounce of elegance you once bore? Stay tuned. Your survival lesson continues as Titanic's maiden voyage becomes her last. You stumble back below deck, heart hammering like a runaway locomotive, and realize the ship's opulence is now a maze of half-lit corridors and hushed panic. You grip your coat tighter, nearly forgetting your pocketful of cigars from the smoking lounge. Today's mission: find a lifeboat, ideally one that's not already at sea, and secure your survival, preferably before the social register scrambles you into lost to the Atlantic status. You push through a pair of sliding oak doors into the first-class lounge, where half the passengers lounge in disbelief. A lady in a tiara clutches her Renoir sketchbook, exclaiming, "My dear, do you suppose this would make a suitable keepsake?" You glance at her dainty canvas. Surely she intends to take it with her onto a lifeboat. Tsk. You decide to prioritize action over aesthetics and slip past her toward the starboard side. On sea deck, you encounter the first lifeboat station. The davits have swung out, and crewmen, faces pale as chalk, are trying to lower boat number 7. Already half filled with women and children. You hesitate. Protocol dictates letting families board first, but the water temperature, hovering near freezing, dictates that boats will fill fast. You sidle up to a steward you recognize from dinner service. "Any chance of a seat, old chap?" you whisper. He eyes you, then snaps. "Men aren't supposed to..." Before he can finish, you produce your first-class steward badge, a flimsy brass trinket, thrust it at him and add, "I have connections." He grumbles but steps aside, directing you into a gap at the front of the boat. You scramble down the gangplank, lowering yourself into the bobbing craft. The crewman slams on the brake, the boat settles, and you slide into a captain's chair, comfort you didn't know lifeboats had. Around you, 10 women clutch handbags, kids bawl, and a portly baroness fumbles with her mink stole. You stifle a laugh. Survival bingo, tiara, mink, and a man who bypassed protocol. The davit man gives the signal. You swing out over the starboard rail. the waves lapping against your knees. Your boating skills differ from your dining skills, but here we are. As you pull away, you glance back at Titanic, her lights flickering like a wounded leviathan resisting the pull of the abyss. You wonder, will this be the last portrait you ever see of Her Majesty? You tuck that melancholy in your pocket along with your cigars and prepare for the open sea's whims. Night deepens, and the lifeboat bobs in the inky dark. You wrap your coat around a shivering child, realizing that chivalry remains in style when hypothermia threatens. You whisper jokes about polar bears, at least they offer mittens, to calm her bawling. A woman next to you pinches your arm. "Thank you," she hisses. You nod, feeling oddly heroic despite wearing a dinner jacket. Hours pass, or perhaps minutes. Time drowns in the dark. You hear distant screams, then a terrifying groan as Titanic's stern lifts, flinging debris skyward. You imagine servants spilling champagne mid-pour, violins snapping strings in panic. The lifeboat rocks violently. Some women cry out, others clutch the sides. You steady the boat, urging calm. "Steady, everyone. Breathe. The worst is behind us." You curse under your breath that your evening cufflinks, made of mother of pearl, are now likely coated in seawater and tears. Suddenly, a flare brightens the sky. One of Titanic's rockets, a ghastly celebration. Its red bloom momentarily illuminates the crowded lifeboat. Pale faces, tear-streaked cheeks, and waterlogged dresses. You recall that fireworks were meant to dazzle, not denounce the dead. You grip the oar until your knuckles blanch. Dawn's pale fingers chase away night's cloak. The sea is calm once more, but the lifeboat is surrounded by emptiness. No rescue ship in sight. You check your watch. Hours since Titanic sank, and rescue is still at least hours away. You need to keep spirits and body heat up. You start organized rowing, instructing able passengers. The Baroness pipes up. "I never knew I could row." Boots meet oars, women grunt, and the boat surges through glassy water. You lead a ragtag rowing crew, laughter and curses mingling as you battle exhaustion. By mid-morning, you spot a distant silhouette, RMS Carpathia, steaming toward you like a metallic savior. You hoist an oar, waving frantically, nearly losing your grip. Carpathia's sirens wail. You hear commands barked across decks. Soon, lifeboats are drawn alongside. You help others clamber aboard, sending children up first, then adults. You hoist yourself up as the crew extends hands. On deck, you collapse onto a deck chair, soaked, freezing, yet alive. An officer offers you blankets and tea. You accept both devoutly. You sip the tea, feeling warmth seep into your veins, and wrap the blankets around your shoulders. You look back toward the lifeboat hangars, empty, and feel a pang. Titanic's might has become an ocean memory, your luxury float turned watery tomb. You inhale steam from your cup, savoring each breath. Carpathia's passengers, mostly third-class survivors, huddle with life belts still clinging. A young immigrant woman clasps your hand, tears of relief shining. "Thank you," she says. You nod, speechless, as you gaze forward toward New York's hazy horizon. You realize survival is messy, unconcerned with etiquette, and demands you seize every chance, even if it means muscling into a lifeboat among ladies in pearls. Later, in Carpathia's makeshift infirmary, you share your story with a reporter, a sympathetic newspaperman scribbling furiously. He asks, "Did you ever fear for your life?" You pause, think of the iceberg's hiss, the scrambling panic, the freezing dark. "Fear," you finally say, "is reserved for living. Sinking ships don't scare survivors. They teach us how alive we are." He smiles, jotting the line down as a quote. You decline an offer to stay aboard Carpathia, insisting on catching the next train to Boston. You have cigars to dry, clothes to replace, and a speech to deliver at the club. The night I outsmarted decrepit shipyards. As dawn breaks fully, you step onto the dock at New York, suit still damp, hair flecked with sea salt. Reporters shout your name. Camera flashes pop like celebratory fireworks. Only these fireworks commemorate survival, not demise. You raise a hand in salute, a wry grin as you think. You boarded Titanic seeking luxury. You survived the worst and emerged with a story worth more than any comfort. As crowds cheer, you tip your hat and declare, "Gentlemen and ladies, never underestimate a man with a tuxedo and a stiff upper lip. The Atlantic roars behind you, a reminder that fate is as cold as its waters, but humor, perseverance, and quick thinking can warm even the frostiest odds. And so ends part 2 of your Titanic survival saga. From glittering first-class dining to frantic lifeboat rowing, you've seen the best and worst of human resolve. In part 3, we'll dive into the emotional aftermath, the haunting dreams, the survivor's guilt, and how to rebuild dignity when your best shoes are salt-soaked and your heart still trembles at the whisper of ocean waves. Hold tight. Your lecture on post-disaster survival is just over the horizon. You awaken in your New York hotel room with a start, your head pounding in time with the distant foghorns of Manhattan Harbor. You blink blearily at the gilded wallpaper, half expecting the Titanic's ornate ceilings to reappear above you. Instead, you confront reality. Damp sheets, an overlarge bed that squeaks when you shift, and the lingering taste of Carpathia's medicinal tea still clinging to your tongue. Your hand drifts unconsciously to a folded silk handkerchief in your jacket pocket, one of the only items you managed to smuggle off Titanic at Southampton. You pull it free, bury your face in its soft folds, and inhale the faint scent of smoke and ocean spray. It's a souvenir you never asked for, the smell of survival. Even before your eyes fully adjust, you remember the night's horrors all too clearly. You close them again, desperately willing the images away. Lifeboat rolling in the black void, the shrill screams of passengers scrambling for spots, and that final low groan of Titanic's steel hull as she slipped beneath the waves. But memory, like a stubborn ghost, refuses to vanish. You sit up, swing your legs over the edge of the bed, and touch the floor with cold feet. The room is silent except for the faint click of a passing elevator and the muffled hum of city traffic. Outside, life has carried on as though Titanic never sank, and here you are, clutching a handkerchief dyed with grief. Stumbling into the bathroom, you splash water on your face until the mirror blurs. You scrutinize your reflection. Dark circles ring your eyes, lips cracked from salt and sleeplessness, and a graying mustache that somehow lost its crispness in transit. You attempt a stiff smile, practice for the day ahead, when reporters and well-wishers will crowd your door, hungry for quotes and heroics. You tidy your hair, button your waistcoat, and check your watch. It's barely dawn, but the city is already waking. You need coffee, and a plan. You descend to the hotel cafe, where a jittery waiter greets you as though you're royalty, or at least a celebrity returning from the dead. He pours you a mug of steaming black coffee and places a plate of toast before you. You shovel down 2 slices, butter dripping from your chin, and feel the caffeine sting your senses awake. Thoughts swirl. The reporter on Carpathia who called you Titanic's unlikely hero. The harrowing telegrams you sent to relatives back in England. The telegrams you refused to send so as not to alarm anyone further. You consider reaching for your handkerchief again, but resist. Tissues are more discreet. Over breakfast, you draft a brief memo to the White Star Line's press office. You'll be available for interviews at 10 a.m. in the hotel lobby. You add a note. No gruesome details, just the essential facts and a dash of wit. You tuck the paper into your breast pocket and steel yourself for the performance ahead. Because in 1912, a man's survival isn't just physical, it's social, and society demands a story. At precisely 9:50 a.m., you step into the marble-floored lobby. A throng of camera-toting newsmen, gossip columnists, and curious onlookers has already gathered. They part as you approach, cameras clicking like mechanical applause. You raise a gloved hand in greeting, suppress an urge to adjust your tie, and speak into the nearest microphone. Good morning, everyone. I'm honored to have survived RMS Titanic's maiden voyage, and even more honored to stand here alive and upright. If you'll pardon me, I'd like to dedicate my survival to the sturdiness of first-class stewards, who know how to spot a man in need of a seat, and the resilience of humanity when challenged by adversity. Laughter ripples through the crowd, and you feel the first genuine spark of triumph. Reporters jostle forward. What was going through your mind as Titanic went down? How did you manage to secure your spot in the lifeboat? Do you regret not helping more people aboard? You field each question with practiced brevity. Where fear sharpened my instincts, no shame in seizing an opportunity to survive. I used my steward's badge and a touch of bravado. And survivors must live on and honor those who didn't make it. You glance at your watch and wrap up. Thank you all. I'll take a few one-on-one interviews, then be on my way. Flashbulbs pop. You've done your civic duty, time to retreat. The next hours blur in a whirl of notepads and cameras. You tell interviewers about the absurdity of high society diners trading stories over quail, then racing for lifeboats like everyone else. You recount how a stout baroness rode like a sailor when panic struck, and how a scrawny deckhand lent you his coat when you shivered on Carpathia's deck. You sprinkle in humor. I nearly offered a dozen cigars as bait to board Lifeboat 7. Thankfully, the steward cut me a break, and I got in free of charge. By noon, you've given more quotes than a philosopher on tour, and your throat is raw. You excuse yourself, retreat to the shade of the hotel veranda, and collapse into a wicker chair. There, alone for a moment, you feel the toll of it all. The adrenaline drains like water from a tub. Reality returns. Titanic's passengers, or the ones who lived, are scattered across lifeboats and rescue ships. Families are torn apart, families left behind. You clutch your handkerchief again, eyes misting. You are lucky. But luck, as you now appreciate, is a double-edged sword. It spares you, yet burdens you with memories others can't escape. You inhale deeply, steel yourself, and set the handkerchief aside. No more sentiment, at least until evening. In the afternoon, you board a chartered tender to visit the morgue ship, where bodies recovered from the Atlantic are laid out. The pungent smell of formaldehyde and salt water greets you. Rows of covered stretchers line the deck. Every so often, a stretcher is uncovered, revealing a pale face frozen in final horror. You accompany a Red Cross nurse who gently notes names, ages, and supposed places of embarkation. You see a young groom identified by his wedding ring, an elderly matron in a fur coat that looks incongruously lush on her still figure, and a child clutching a rag doll half submerged in fluid. The nurse murmurs, "We give them dignity in death, at least that much." You nod, close your eyes, and lift the handkerchief to catch a tear. A sailor offers you a mask. You decline. You'd rather breathe the air, however sorrowful. Back on dry land, you attend a brief memorial service at a nearby chapel. Candlelight dances on stained glass windows depicting saints offering refuge. A clergyman delivers a sermon on providence and the moral responsibility of survivors. To live is not merely to exist, but to honor those who do not, he intones. You kneel, clasp your hands, and offer a silent prayer to any deity listening. Then you rise, a renewed sense of purpose stirring within. You will live well, not to flaunt survival, but to ensure it means something. That night, newsreel crews descend for a dramatized reenactment of Titanic's sinking, complete with actors, model ships and tanks, and dramatic lighting. You're invited to attend as a guest of honor. As you sit in the darkened theater, you recognize the familiarity of panic in the actor's eyes, but also the clear absence of true terror. You whisper to the ticket taker, "They've never really been freezing in the water, have they?" He nods solemnly. You turn away, unwilling to watch scenes you've lived. Instead, you slip out, drown your disappointment in whiskey at the hotel bar, and scribble in your journal. No simulation can capture the weight of water filling your lungs or the chill of silk gowns plastering to skin under frigid seas. Sleep eludes you. You wander the streets of Manhattan in the small hours, hoodie pulled over your head, hands thrust in coat pockets. The city's bustle fades to a lullaby of distant sirens and the clatter of elevated trains. You pause by a newsstand blazing with headlines: Titanic tragedy, over 1,500 lives lost, in survivor's tale, heroics and horror. You buy a paper, press it to your chest, and read until your eyes blur. Each story reshapes the narrative. Some laud your bravery, others question the ethics of lifeboat protocols. You realize that once you survive a disaster, you become part of its story, subject to interpretation and debate. The disaster was physical. Now you face a new challenge, surviving the aftermath of notoriety. In the weeks that follow, you receive invitations to speak at gentlemen's clubs, charitable fundraisers for the Titanic Relief Fund, and exclusive dinners where wealthy patrons exchange condolences over brandy. You attend some and decline others. At each appearance, you deliver a short speech, honoring the lost, praising the rescuers, and urging reforms in maritime safety. You challenge your audience to demand enough lifeboats on future liners. Unsinkable floats aren't enough if they can't hold half the ship's complement. Your words catch attention. Congress convenes hearings, new regulations are drafted, and you find yourself an unlikely advocate for ocean travelers. You realize that survival extends beyond breath and bone. It includes the ability to transform trauma into positive change, yet private moments still catch you off guard. One evening, alone in your study, you open a cedar chest and remove the silver pocket watch gifted by the Titanic's purser, engraved, "To those who remember." You wind it slowly, listening to its steady tick. You place it on your desk, light a single candle, and watch the flame dance. You reflect on how, every time you hear ticking, you'll remember the seconds counting down as Titanic sank. The watch is a talisman now, a reminder that time is precious, survival fleeting, and every tick an opportunity. In quieter times, you return to Carpathia's passenger manifest and write letters to fellow survivors, forging friendships born of shared ordeal. You correspond with that little girl whose father rowed her to safety, and with the Baroness whose mink you swear warmed you in the boat. You gather their accounts, adding them to your own, compiling a private anthology of Titanic voices. Together, you preserve the truth beneath the headlines and sanitize cinematics. Months pass, and the shock subsides into a steady rhythm of activism, memoir writing, and occasional nightmares. You decide to pen a memoir, Ice and Iron, My Voyage Through Doom, to capture both your personal odyssey and practical survival lessons. Pack extra socks, always trust your instincts over unsinkable labels, and never underestimate the kindness of strangers in jackets too small to keep them warm. You contract with a publisher, type out revisions on a clacking Remington, and watch your words form a guide for future generations, so that no traveler boards a ship without knowing the cost of hubris. By the time your book launches the following spring, Titanic is already mythologized, a monument to human ambition and folly. You stand on a bookstore podium, field questions and sign copies. A young man approaches, wide-eyed, and asks, "Do you ever regret surviving when so many didn't?" You pause, search for honesty. "I regret losing friends, yes," you say, "but I cannot regret living. Every day I breathe is an opportunity to honor them, for justice at sea, for better safety, for stories that must not be forgotten." He nods solemnly, and you sign his book. Standing afterward by a display adorned with Titanic memorabilia, you glance at a model ship in a bottle. It's pristine, no ice damage, no missing lifeboats. You smile sadly. Real life isn't a museum piece, it's a churning sea where fate can shift in an instant. But you've learned to navigate its currents, to steer toward purpose, and to help others follow. And so concludes part 3 of your Titanic survival saga. From the fog of shock and media frenzy to the forging of a purpose-driven life. You've survived the ordeal, weathered the headlines, and transformed horror into advocacy. Next time, in part 4, we'll explore the final chapter. Rebuilding normalcy, solitude's challenges, and the enduring echoes of a disaster that changed the world, and you, forever. Until then, keep your life vests handy, your humor intact, and remember, the sea may claim ships, but it cannot drown a determined spirit. You awaken in your country estate, windows open to a breeze that carries birdsong instead of foghorns, and realize that the world has moved on without you. No lifeboats bobbing on the shore, no reporters crowding your doorstep. Just spring sunlight and the distant clip-clop of a carriage. You lie in bed a moment, pondering whether surviving Titanic was an oceanic achievement or a lifetime sentence of survivor's guilt. Either way, breakfast awaits, and you've never been one to let existential dread delay your omelet. Downstairs, your housekeeper greets you with a tray of tea and toast. You accept both with the grace of someone who once thanklessly rowed a lifeboat through freezing darkness. Over sips of Earl Grey, you review your schedule. Morning correspondence with maritime safety committees, a midday train ride to London for a charity gala, and an afternoon scribbling your memoir prologue. All in a day's work for a man who nearly went under in the North Atlantic. Dressing, you catch your reflection and pause. Your tie knot is perfect, but your eyes betray sleepless nights. You pat your lapel pocket, feeling the familiar bulge of your silver pocket watch, the survivor's timepiece. It ticks on, indifferent to memory, urging you to put one foot in front of the other. You grab your coat and head out, stepping into the world that's both changed and unchanged by your ordeal. The carriage rumbles through lanes lined with blossoming trees. You gaze at passers-by, children skipping to school, merchants opening shutters, couples strolling arm in arm, unaware that their ancestors might someday reenact Titanic sinking as lavish pageants. It's comforting in a way. Life endures. Yet you carry a secret weight. Every creak of wood under the carriage, every swell of the distant river, dredges up echoes of that final groan of steel beneath the waves. At the London Gala that evening, you're escorted to a table draped in white linen, where you join dignitaries and philanthropists pouring wine with deliberation rather than desperation. A baroness thanks you personally for helping fund new lifeboat regulations. A dowager duchess offers you a brooch encrusted with sapphires. For bravery, she insists. You accept graciously, though part of you wonders if any jewel can truly outshine the memory of shivering in an open boat at dawn. Between courses, you deliver a short address, an impassioned and occasionally sardonic plea for maritime safety reforms. You recount how unsinkable became a cruel joke, how half the boat's complement had no chance once the compartments failed, and how countless lives might be spared if regulations ensure enough lifeboats, proper drills, and emergency communication. You lace your speech with humor. If I had a penny for every time I heard practically unsinkable, I'd buy my own fleet. And the crowd laughs, applause rippling through crystal glasses. You pause, letting the moment sink in. Laughter in a ballroom is more powerful than panic on the open sea. Late that night, alone in your hotel suite, you write the final pages of your memoir. You describe the physical hardship of cramped lifeboat benches and the mental strain of leaving others behind. You catalog the kindnesses, a deckhand's coat, a steward's badge, a stranger's comforting words, and the cruelties, overcrowded boats, broken davits, orders to women and children first, that often turned into everyone fend for yourself. You type until your fingers ache, forging a narrative that is part survival guide, part elegy, part dark comedy about humanity's absurd capacity for hubris. Exhausted, you retreat to bed, but sleep remains elusive. You lie awake listening to the city hum outside your window, half expecting to hear the Titanic's ghostly whistle. Instead, you hear door knocks, muffled voices, hallway visitors perhaps. You reach for the bedside light, heart ticking in time with your watch. No, it's just your own mind stirring memories. You close your eyes and drift into a dream of slippery decks and splintered railings, only to wake and find yourself in a soft mattress, warm sheets cocooning you, life lapping at your fingertips rather than your ankles. Morning brings a quiet resolve. You rise before dawn and walk through mist over dew-soaked lawns. The world is hushed, as if tiptoeing around memory. You pause by a reflecting pool, peer into its glassy surface, and see a man both haunted and hopeful. You dip your hand in the water and watch ripples radiate outward, small disturbances that nonetheless reshape the surface. You realize your survival has created ripples far beyond yourself, in policy changes, in rescued lives, in stories shared around hearths and lecture halls. Back at your desk, you pen letters to fellow survivors, among them the little girl you rode blankets to, the baroness whose oar you steadied, even a ship's musician who recalls the final strains of violin music cutting through terror. You offer them words of gratitude, companionship, and solidarity. You promise to include their voices in a forthcoming anthology of Titanic survivors, because no one person's story should drown out another's. Weeks later, you travel to the premiere of a motion picture dramatizing the Titanic disaster. You sit in the darkened theater, flanked by co-survivors clutching one another's hands. The film portrays opulent parties, heroic rescues, and tragic drownings, all underscored by a sweeping orchestral score. You cringe as actors deliver lines you uttered in interviews, realize the iceberg impact is too glittery, and wince at the inaccuracies that swallow your truth whole. Afterwards, you join a post-screening panel and calmly yet firmly point out the film's failings, exaggerations that trivialize fear, omissions that sanitize suffering, and dialogue that trades depth for drama. The director thanks you, shadows of apology in his eyes, and you leave knowing that history deserves more than celluloid spectacle. Over the years, you continue your advocacy, serving on safety boards, speaking at reunions, funding scholarships for maritime engineers, even consulting on liner designs to ensure sufficient lifeboat capacity in emergency drills. You travel less by ocean and more by rail and land, preferring to keep your feet on solid ground, but you never turn down an invitation to speak on board modern vessels. You stride across polished decks, glance at the lifeboats dangling above, and offer to share your story, free of charge, you quip, before the captain can introduce you. On anniversaries of the sinking, you gather with other survivors beneath a steel monument near the Atlantic shore. You place a wreath of white roses at its base, each bloom a silent tribute to the 1,500 souls lost. Together, you stand in solemn remembrance, the wind carrying salt and memory in equal measure. You feel your pulse quicken as you recite names: Mrs. Evelyn Barker, Mr. Samuel Thompson, voices carried on the wind. Then you step forward and speak of renewal, how trauma need not be a tomb, how survival can bloom into compassion, and how, yes, the sea gives us much, but it can also take everything, so we must honor the living with deeds, not just words. In your twilight years, you retire to a sea view cottage where you watch sunrise over waves that may still hide icebergs miles offshore. You keep your silver pocket watch on the bedside table. It ticks dutifully, a companion in silence. Mementos of that night: your battered coat, a battered lifeboat seat cushion, letters from fellow survivors, are displayed in a glass cabinet in the study, each item a testament to fragility and resilience. One evening, as the sky blazes with molten oranges and pinks, you walk the shoreline, imprinting footsteps in wet sand. You pause where the water laps your shoes, gaze at the horizon blending sea and sky, and offer a quiet word of thanks for rescue that arrived just in time, for compassion that warmed frozen bones, and for the strange blessing of surviving a disaster so grand it changed maritime history forever. You turn and walk home, knowing life's true voyage isn't measured in nautical miles, but in breaths, choices, and the courage to face each dawn, no matter how dark the night that came before. And as you step over the threshold, you carry with you the final lesson Titanic taught you: to cherish every moment above the waves, and to remain ever vigilant, ever hopeful, and ever ready to throw a lifeline when fate pulls someone under. Close-up of a quivering hand gripping a crude wooden spear, the thunder of 10,000 hooves, villages aflame from horizon to horizon, and you, alone, holding nothing but a rickety spear in sheer, unhinged hope. Would you survive the Mongol horde? Strap in. Your nightmare guide to history's most ruthless invaders begins now. Part 1. You awaken before dawn to the frantic crowing of roosters and the distant crackle of torches being lit along the palisade walls. It's the spring of 1221, and you, last in line of a line of peasants, have volunteered, under threat of press gang, to join the town militia of Kulenhurst, a walled settlement perched on a windswept steppe corridor. Your armor consists of a weathered leather jerkin 2 sizes too small, a battered wooden shield painted with your lord's crest, a half moon and 3 wheat sheaves, and a spear so splintered it feels like it might disintegrate if you sneeze. You stretch, wincing as every joint in your body reminds you that yesterday's training drill was medieval CrossFit and you are gloriously unfit. Stepping into the courtyard, you inhale the chill morning air. Your breath rises like a ghostly prayer. The crack of leather against wood echoes as the militia captain, a hulking man named Petrock the Bull, slaps you on the back so hard you almost lose your breakfast. "Get yourselves ready," he bellows. Words from the watchtower. Mongol raiders sighted east of the river. They move faster than a jackrabbit on fire. We hold the walls or we die in the fields. Your choice, lads. Choice is overrated. You tighten the leather strap under your chin, heft your shield, and join a ragged line of farmers, blacksmith apprentices, and a handful of city guards so hungover they've already blundered into 2 barrels of ale. Petrock paces before you, each step rattling his chainmail like a kettle drum. "We've got archers on the ramparts," he says, pointing to spears jutting over the wooden palisade. "They'll rain death on anything that comes near. Infantry, you're with me. We'll muster at the east gate. Pray you don't face trolls." More of a metaphorical threat, but still. You shuffle toward the gate, absorbing the faces around you. Old Vlad, whose one eye gleams with grim determination. Young Marika, who's barely 15 but can swing an axe like a berserk goddess. And Thomas the Fletcher, still inspecting his bows as though he's about to join a hunting trip, rather than face riders who enslave entire villages. You wonder, did any of these people remember to bathe this week? Hygiene is a luxury when existential terror looms. At the gate, you clamber over the wooden beams, smacking your shin in the process. A guard tosses you a bucket of water. "For your face, whelp," and you wipe crusted sleep from your eyes. Beyond the gate lies the dusty plain, bordered by the sluggish ribbon of the Olkhon River, and then boundless steppe where any sane person would not go willingly. But know that the Mongol scouts, light cavalry in leather lamellar, bows slung across their backs, are already out there, gauging your defenses like wolves circling prey. Dawn breaks, and with it, a horn blast so deep it rattles your innards. Arrows whistle past as the Mongols launch a probing volley. You crouch behind an overturned cart, heart in your throat. The wooden gate's planks shudder under impact. Across the moat, archers on the ramparts send back a lethal storm of arrows that blot out the sun, if only for a split second. One arrow thunks into the cart's wheel. Another tears through the leather jerkin of the man beside you. He curses, drops to one knee, and squeezes blood between his fingers. "Bugger," he mutters. "I was going to marry next month." Petrock roars, "Form shield wall." You press your buckler against your chest, raise your spear horizontally, and stand shoulder to shoulder with your comrades. Shield edges overlap, wooden boards creaking under the combined weight. You hear Marika muttering a prayer to the god of axes. Thomas positions a quiver at your back. He might need rescuing later, but at least he's organized. The Mongols pause, regroup, then charge. Dust explodes beneath their hooves as dozens of mounted archers surge forward, loosed arrows arcing in twin waves overhead. You hold your breath, waiting for the telltale ping of steel on wood, but the Mongols unleash a rain of arrows that slams into shields like hailstones. Helmets splinter, wooden braces crack, and screams rise in a terrible chorus. One of your neighbors, a lanky shepherd conscript named Udo, staggering under arrow wounds in both shoulders, yells, "For the king!" before collapsing. You sob, grip your spear tighter, and fight the urge to puke. Then Petrock bellows, "Hold steady!" Wait. The cavalry riders slow, regroup, and ride off again, only to return from the south flank. You whirl, trying to rally your side of the shield wall, but the cartwheel narrow streets behind you restrict movement. Every time the Mongols circle, you glimpse their eyes, cold, calculating, devoid of mercy. They're masters of psychological warfare, not just slaughtering your kind, but testing your mettle, your resolve, whether you'll hold or break. After what feels like hours, the archery duel relents. The Mongols recede to the horizon, leaving a carpet of bodies, broken shields, and shattered morale. The archers on the wall cheer, danger averted for now, but Petrock's face is etched with fury and concern. He surveys losses, nearly 30 dead, twice as many wounded, and only half of your shield line intact. He turns to you, eyes blazing. "We cannot endure another barrage. We need a plan. Wall alone won't save us." The militia scrabbles for solutions. Tomas suggests reinforcing the east gate with fallen beams. Marika volunteers to lead a strike team to destroy the nearby brush where Mongols might hide. The town blacksmith, a burly brute named Grigor, offers to smelt more arrowheads, though the forge's coal stores are barely enough for panic fires, let alone mass production. You quietly pass around your last loaf of bread and small flask of mead. No one's eating since breakfast turned to battle rations. Petrock calls for volunteers for a night raid. Slip beyond the walls under cover of darkness, set fire to a Mongol supply cache spotted by scouts, and return before dawn. It's a suicide mission, the kind of desperate gamble that medieval generals write poems about. Either heroic victory or collective oblivion. A hush falls. Hands raise hesitantly. Marika, her face streaked with tears and soot. Udo's brother, grim with vengeance. And shockingly, Thomas, the Fletcher, who finally looks up from his bows and says, "If we let them rest and resupply, they'll finish us by sunrise. I'll go. But we need a guide." You catch Tomas's eye. He's looking at you. Your pulse hammers, a chance to strike back, to reclaim agency, but also a near-certain death sentence. Yet what choice do you have? The Mongols are masters of attrition. Waiting means eventual slaughter or subjugation. You swallow and stand. "I'll go," you announce, surprising yourself more than anyone else. Tomas beams. Perfect, small, fast, uncertain. Night descends and you steel yourself. Don leather gloves, wrap a cloak around your shoulders, and heft your splintered spear. Marika ties her axe to her back. Grigor hands you a hastily forged dagger, a gift heavier than the screeching owl perched above the gate. You slip out with 3 others, a scout named Mira with keen eyes, Petrus the baker, who insists on carrying extra bread for energy, and Tomas, who knows the terrain. The moon is a thin sliver, providing just enough light as you skirt the outer palisade and slip into the tall grasses beyond. Each step feels amplified. The night air bears the distant clip of horses' hooves, the low murmur of Mongol camps. You crouch behind a stand of birch trees, huddled like deer before the hunt. Mira whispers coordinates. Thomas checks his small, battered map. "They've set fires to dry meat and leather," he says. "That'll be our beacon." You trudge toward the glow, heart pounding in time with each step. The crackling of flames grows louder. Soon you see rows of yurts, canvas tents glowing from within, riders dancing around fires with reckless laughter. They have so little guilt, young warriors sipping fermented mare's milk, sharpening curved sabers, laughing at your futile defenses. Fury surges in your veins. You unsheath your dagger, ready to strike, ready to set their supplies ablaze. But as you step forward, a guard on horseback emerges, silhouetted against the firelight. He snorts, raises an alarm, and you realize the raid has failed before it began. The Mongols converge like locusts, encircling your small band. Thomas curses, Marika roars a battle cry, and Petrus, poor Petrus, screams and drops the bread. You meet saber blows in the dark, desperate, uncoordinated, but fueled by raw terror. You parry a blade aimed for your side. The steel bites through leather and draws blood. You slash back blindly, nicking a warrior's leg. The taste of iron floods your mouth. Then, as quickly as it began, it's over. Mira falls, arrow piercing her throat. Petrus is trampled. Thomas fights on until he's overwhelmed. You stagger back, clutching your bleeding side, and run, stumbling through the grass, the fires roaring behind you, the Mongol cries in your ears. You burst into the town's open fields just as the guard tower horns blast "Intruder." Petrok's men rush out, torches blazing. You collapse at the gate, body and spirit on the brink. They haul you inside, slam the gate shut, and throw buckets of water on your face. You gasp, fighting darkness at the edge of vision. Petrok kneels beside you. "You fools," he snarls, anger and relief in his voice. "You thought one raid would stop the horde? We fight or we run, but no more amateurs. Tomorrow at dawn, we ride south to seek aid at the Emperor's fortress. Tonight, we heal, if we survive." You lie on a straw bed in the infirmary tent, delirious from blood loss and fever. The walls of Kulanhurst stand bowed but unbroken. You have escaped death by a hair, yet with every breath, you know the true invasion has only just begun. The Mongols will return, stronger, better prepared. And you, dear viewer, have learned the hardest lesson. Surviving a Mongol invasion demands more than courage. It demands cunning, alliances, and an iron will to endure the storm on the steppe. In part 2, we'll follow your desperate flight to the Emperor's fortress, negotiate with rival nobles, navigate frozen mountain passes, and confront the unthinkable. Can a ragtag band of peasants and soldiers outlast the greatest cavalry the world has ever seen? Stay with us. Tonight we rest, but at dawn, the true test begins. Dawn's pale light filters through soot-darkened clouds as you stir on your straw pallet, ribs still aching from last night's failed raid. The infirmary swirls around you, blood-stained linen, the scent of boiled herbs, and groans from other wounded souls rehearsing pain like a chorus. You see Petrok, black eyes rimmed with sleeplessness, barking orders at a medic. He glances your way and snarls, "Get up, you living corpse. We leave in an hour for Emperor Monk's stronghold. No time for pity parties." You haul yourself upright, wincing, and watch the militia gather outside the tent. Roughly 60 of you remain, farmers turned fighters, smiths still clutching hammers, and a handful of town guards whose faces have grown as hollow as distant moons. You glimpse Marika, one arm in a sling, but steel in her eyes, and nod. She grins through cracked lips. Still alive. That's something. By first light, the gates swing wide. Beyond lies a trampled field of churned mud and mangled shields, a silent testament to yesterday's carnage. You fall in step with Petrok's column, the battered militia, a small contingent of cavalry, riders on shaggy horses gifted by neighboring lords, and a cart carrying your wounded, including yourself. Behind you stretches the steppe, endless and indifferent, with only the distant mountains to promise refuge. Your destination, Emperor Monk's fortress at Karakorum, some 100 miles northwest, a journey through plains, forests, and mountain passes, all under threat of Mongol scouts or worse, roving bands of deserters turned bandits. The plan: plead the emperor for reinforcements, then return to lift Kulenhurst's curse. If the Mongols strike while you're away, the town falls. If you don't return, no hope remains. Fate stirs, and you are its reluctant envoy. The first leg of the trek is the open steppe, rolling grass sea dotted with yurts of nomadic herders. As you ride, you pass small encampments where families harvest spring's lambs. Children wave at your ragged column, innocent to the war's horrors. You force a smile in your own childhood memories, fishing by the riverbank. Your mother's fresh bread flash like fragile fireflies. A pang twists your gut. Will hearth and home still stand on your return? Mid-morning, petrels wheel overhead as your scouts whirl in a hunter's circle. One returns, breathless, Mongol light cavalry to the east, about 50 riders. Petrok's face flints. They'll shadow us, looking for stragglers. He signals the cavalry escort. 24 riders thunder forward to harass the shadow, drawing the scouts into cat-and-mouse skirmishes. You witness mounted archers, bows stringing taut as rainbows, firing whistling arrows that burrow into shields and horses alike. Your heart hammers. This is no leisurely parade, it's a gauntlet. By midday, Petrok halts at a grove of birch for respite. Sentries stand watch, fingers twitching on reins. Tomas applies poultices to your wounds, whistling tunelessly. You'll live, he declares with more confidence than you feel. You chew a piece of hardtack, grit in your teeth like pebbles, and sip tepid water. Next to you, the baker's apprentice weeps softly, his brother lying a dozen miles back, left to heal or perish. No time to console every broken spirit. The Mongols don't wait. As you remount, the wind shifts, bringing an uncanny silence. The grass stands still, the birch leaves motionless. You sense rather than see the approaching threat, a phantom host on the horizon, hooves gliding over grass. Petrok raises his sword. Line up, shield wall. You slide into formation, a jagged row of weathered spears and battered shields, cavalry flanking on each side. The Mongol contingent emerges, 50 horsemen in earthen lamellar, faces painted for war. They spread out, encircling you, demonstrating classic feigned retreat tactics, baiting you to break ranks. Petrok snarls, "Don't fall for it." You swallow, muscles coiled, shield braced. A single arrow whistles past, prompting your archers, Thomas among them, to loose return fire. You feel a spark of pride as one arrow clatters off a rider's helm. The Mongols depart, drifting back into the distance. Behind them, a smaller squad veers left into the woods. You know this is reconnaissance. They intend to find weak points, to learn your pattern. No rest for the vigilant. You press onward, the column threading through birch and pine, canopy dark as battle smoke. The forest is eerily quiet, until you hear the crack of a twig. Petrok raises a gauntlet finger, and you freeze. Viking tales of ambush flash in your mind, but here comes the real thing. Mongol horse archers, ghost silent, encircling the woods. They emerge in small groups, loosing volleys into the column's flanks. You raise shield just in time as arrows splinter wood and clip leather. Cavalry charges forward, sabers flashing. You glimpse steel ringing off armor. Chaos erupts. Horses rear, men scramble for cover, and the forest floor becomes a tangle of dust, leaves, and terror. Petrok roars, "Form wedge. Punch through." He leads a counterstrike. Cavalry bursting through the trees, spears lowered, engines of controlled panic. You follow spear-thrusting, shield-bashing riders aside. A Mongol crashes into your shield. You stagger, then strike with your dagger, a lucky slash to the thigh. He howls and tumbles. Your reinforcements arrive, flanking riders spurring in from the north, shouting war cries borrowed from every slaughter they've heard. The ambush breaks. The Mongols withdraw with the discipline of hunters, leaving no riders behind. You count your losses, 3 dead, a dozen wounded. The forest echoes with groans and sobs. Panting, Petrok surveys the carnage. "They test us, then vanish," he says. "We must move faster. Tonight we reach the foothills. Tomorrow, the Emperor's gates." You stare at the dark tree line, half afraid they'll materialize again. Survival feels like paper thin. One wrong step, and the steppe claims you. As dusk falls, you crest a low ridge and behold the spires of Karakorum under flickering torchlight, walls of stone and timber, mottes crowned with yurts, and the emperor's great tent blazing like a bonfire against night. Relief washes through you, mingled with dread. Will monk heed peasants' pleas? Will his legions even exist beyond legend? A lone torchlight winks atop a tower. Petrock nods, sheath rattling. We're not done yet. You descend toward the fortress, wary of assassins in the shadows but eager for sanctuary and aid. Ahead lies the emperor's courtyard, where courtiers will test your tale, nobles weigh your worth, and generals judge your mettle. Surviving the steppe was only half the battle. Now you must survive the politics of Karakorum. And so, dear viewer, you've lived through shield walls and ambushes, seen the Mongol horde's shadow and felt its sting. In part 3, we'll navigate the emperor's court, bribe scheming mandarins, negotiate alliances with rival clans, endure feasts of fermented mare's milk, a questionable delicacy, and secure the reinforcements your town so desperately needs. Stay with us. Courts can be as perilous as battlefields, and your survival still hangs by a thread. The great double gates of Karakorum swing open before you with a ponderous groan, revealing a swirl of color, noise, and intrigue that threatens to overwhelm even the hardiest steppe warrior. You stumble through the sawdust-strewn courtyard, limbs stiff from days of riding, and find yourself face to face with a hulking yak-skin throne upon which sits Emperor Monk himself. He's flanked by tartar-clad generals, silk-robed mandarins, and 2 enormous hounds that sniff your saddlebag as if sizing up your worth. A hush falls. Your world contracts to the length of a single, terrifying heartbeat. Who approaches my court? Monk booms in halting Turkic, tinged with Chinese inflections, an accent you suspect carries every conquered dialect from Beijing to Baghdad. You bow so low you fear your leather jerkin will split. Great Khan, you stammer, I come from Kulonhurst, a humble town besieged by your forces. I seek aid to defend our walls, spare our families, and prove our loyalty. The courtiers exchange glances. A silk-clad eunuch taps his flute. A general strokes his mustache. Monk considers you as one might a slender sheepskin offered for inspection, then nods. Tell me of this defense, he commands. You swallow and launch into your account. The arrow storm at the east gate, the failed night raid, the ambush in the birch. You describe Petrock's valor, Marika's axe-swinging fury, and the militia's ragged bravery. With each flourish, you gauge the Khan's expression. Stone-faced at first, then a glimmer of respect flickers in his dark eyes. When you finish, silence ensues. Then Monk leans forward, baring teeth in what might be a grin, or a prelude to decapitation. You speak well, peasant, but words alone do not hold back 10,000 horses. Why should I spare Kulonhurst? A murmur ripples through the hall. You feel sweat beat at your hairline. This is the moment of truth. Do you beg, bribe, or bluff? You opt for honesty, plus a dash of opportunism. Because Kulonhurst lies on the Silk Road's branch, you say. It is a waypoint for your trade caravans, spices, silks, horses. Its merchants will pay tribute. Its smiths forge arrowheads for your armies. Protect us, and you secure your supply line. At mention of tribute, the silk robes brighten. A merchant with eyebrows like scimitars leans in, whispering to a minister, "A chance to expand tax revenue, my lord." Monk's generals exchange approving nods. The Khan strokes his chin. Tribute and trade, he muses. You offer your town as a toll station, but will they deliver? You seize the opening. I will lead their merchants myself, you declare, voice strong despite the ache in your ribs. We will deliver tribute on time, furs of the north, grains of the south, and horses of Kulonhurst's famed breed. Your caravans will be fed, watered, and guided safely through the steppe. The eunuch claps slowly, a mocking rhythm. Monk's gaze narrows. And if they fail? Then I will answer with my head. Here, if you so wish. You offer, pointing dramatically to your neck. A collective gasp. The Khan's eyes gleam. Bold words. He leans back. Very well. I grant Kulonhurst reprieve. You will lead a detachment of my yam riders, my fastest mounted couriers, to escort your tribute and fortify your walls. He motions to a crusty general. Khan Jebe will accompany him. Khan Jebe steps forward, a lean figure draped in leopard pelts. He bows once, steel stirrups clinking. I shall ensure your safe passage, he promises, voice like wind through reeds. And should you betray me, desert my banner, or dally on the road, I will hunt you like the jackal hunts the hare. You swallow, nod, and bow again, careful this time not to crack your jerkin. The courtiers erupt in polite applause. A flurry of scribes begin scrawling decrees, orders for the tribute, instructions for the Yam escort, and a decree that Kulenhurst's fortifications may stand unmolested, for now. Within the hour, Petrarch and you stand before the Khan's tent, clutching official seals and directives. You're handed a sealed scroll granting Kulenhurst safe pass status and detailing tribute amounts, a talisman of pure silver etched with the Khan's seal, proof to embolden reluctant militia and cow spirits, a small band of Yam riders mounted on fine steppe ponies, red tasseled lances gleaming at their sides. Khan Jabi hands you a map of the trade corridors, marked with Mongol way stations and patrol routes. He nods curtly. We depart at dawn. Stay close, speak little, and trust no one except your escort. The steppe is wide. Only the wind and the Khan remain constant. Night falls on Karakoram's fires, and you join your militia in the courtyard. They gaze at you as though you've returned from the dead, or from the belly of a goat. You slam the silver talisman on a table. We have what we need, you shout. Good horses, official sanction, and a promise from the Khan himself. Marika claps you on the back, hard enough to threaten your shoulder, but you barely flinch. Now, let's see if he keeps his promise. At dawn, you mount your steed, an aging mare with sunny eyes, and lead the column out of Karakoram beneath banners bearing the Khan's mark. The Yam riders flank you, exchanging lullaby whistles with the wind. Thomas hands you a fresh scroll, the tribute tally. You glance down, 20 wagon loads of furs, 5 of grain, and 2 of iron tools, enough to fill every storehouse along the Silk Road. You glance at the horizon, already streaked with rosy light, and realize the true test lies ahead. Navigating mountain passes notorious for bandits, forested valleys where rogue clans lie in wait, and Mongol patrols whose loyalties shift like desert sands. Will your tribute train arrive intact? Will Kulenhurst indeed stand? And above all, can you keep your promise, your head, from ending up as a curiosity on the steppe? As the first wagon crests a rise, you exhale. The wind carries the scent of grass, wood smoke, and promise. Behind you, Karakoram's walls shrink to a memory. Ahead, the open steppe beckons. You steel yourself for the journey. At each way station, you'll barter, defend, and negotiate. Every choice means life or death. But now, armed with Mongol sanction and a dash of your own desperate will, you ride forth, peasant-turned envoy, spear at your side, ironic grin across your face. In Part 4, we'll follow your winding journey back to Kulenhurst, surviving ambushes in the Altai passes, forging fragile alliances with rival clans, and racing against time and traitors to deliver the tribute that stands between your town and oblivion. The Mongol horde may be vast, but so is human cunning. Stay with us, your destiny and that of Kulenhurst hangs in the balance. Dawn's chill air cuts through your travel-worn cloak as you stand atop a gentle slope overlooking the first Mongol way station. Tents of fur and canvas cluster beneath you, smoke curling from communal cauldrons where soldiers boil horsemeat stew. The wagons of tribute creak below, laden with furs, grain, and iron tools that rattle like distant thunder. Your heart hammers. Every ounce of hope for Kulenhurst rides on your next decisions. You descend into the camp flanked by Khan Jibi's Yam riders, lean warriors who move with uncanny synchronicity. Their leader, Ba-Atur the Hawk, eyes your party with measured calm. We wait for the Khan's courier to confirm the next relay, he says in clipped Turkic. You nod, scanning the horizon. No courier appears, only the shimmering heat mirage of the steppe. Hours stretch by. Your militia grows restless. Farmers with calloused hands now chafe at tethered horses. Petrarch paces beside you. If the relay doesn't come, he mutters, we're stranded here. Mongol code or not, hungry men raid. You respect his pragmatism. Hunger can break any oath. Just as tension peaks, a rider appears, a lithe youth on a smoky gray stallion, bearing the Khan's white banner. He gallops in, dismounts, and forks a scroll to you. Proceed through the Altai Pass. The next station awaits at the Three Rivers Junction. Travel swiftly. The courier melts back into a swirl of dust and hoofbeats. Relief surges, but danger lurks. The Altai Pass is notorious. Narrow trails, razor-sharp cliffs, and bandits drawn by tales of Mongol riches. You gather your column, 20 yam riders, 30 militia on borrowed steeds, and 24 pack horses burdened with tribute. You dispatch the baker's apprentice, now recovered, to ride ahead with instructions for the Three Rivers Station. You mount your own mare and signal the departure. The rocky trail winds upward, grass replaced by stunted pines. Snowdrifts linger in shaded hollows. The wind moans like a wounded wolf. A scout returns pale-faced. Tracks, several dozen horses coming up behind. Petrock swears, and Khan Jabe narrows his eyes. Bandits or renegade lords, he says. We'll know soon. You grip your spear, shield slung, and urge your horse forward. A sudden volley of arrows whistles from the tree line. One thunks into a wagon axle. Another pins a rider's sleeve to his flank. Chaos erupts. Khan Jabe commands, "Form ring." The yam riders wheel, shields outward, creating a living fortress around the wagons. Your militia scrambles to grasp spears and hurl javelins at the unseen archers. The forest echoes with battle cries and the clang of steel. You spot shapes darting between trees, bandits in wolf pelts, faces painted with ash. They strike, then vanish, returning with arrows that rain down like deadly hail. You raise your shield, shout for your militia to hold, and hurl a spear at a charging bandit, striking him square in the chest. He tumbles back, but two more replace him. The path becomes a gauntlet. Amid the fray, you glimpse horses rearing, wagons overturning, and the baker's apprentice thrown to the ground. Instinct flares. You charge through the gap, shield bashing a bandit aside, dagger flashing to cut his throat. You yank the apprentice upright. He vomits, clutching a broken reins. You propel him towards safety inside the ring. Khan Jabe's riders tighten the circle, driving the bandits back in a fierce counterattack of hooves and sabers. After what feels like an eternity, the bandits break and flee into the trees, leaving behind wounded and tribute strewn across the trail. Khan Jabe surveys the carnage. 2 wagons destroyed, a dozen militia dead, several riders missing. He turns to you. Your caravan bleeds tribute, he states. We can abandon the scant few wagons left or press on with what remains. Petrock steps forward, voice steady. Better to deliver half than none. My men can carry the furs. The grain we drop will feed the bandits. You nod, agony twisting your chest. Tribute is tribute, and every lost bale weakens Kulenhurst. Yet surrendering to pragmatism, you command. Pack the remaining furs and iron tools. Leave the grain behind. Every bale of barley is worth a man's life, both ours and Kulenhurst's. Yam riders help hoist bundles onto horses as you and Khan Jabe's warriors fend off a final drifting ambush. With the stolen grain behind you and battered wagons ahead, the column pushes through the path's choke point. Back on the ridge, you pause, chest heaving, and watch the survivors, your militia, ragged but resolute, salute the Khan's banner. In that salute, you see determination. You set out as peasants bound for doom. Now you press onward as survivors fighting for home. The descent from the Altai Pass opens onto rolling foothills. The air warms, spruce gives way to grassy knolls. At midday, you glimpse smoke rising above a cluster of yurts by a glittering river fork, the Three Rivers Junction. You quicken your pace, sighting the way station's fortifications, earthworks, watchtowers, and a garrison of UN troops. But before you reach safety, a horn blasts. The station is under siege by a rival Mongol faction refusing to honor the Khan's orders. Their banner, black on crimson, flaps atop a battered tent. You realize the Khan's decree holds here only if you can enforce it. Without hesitation, Khan Jabe leads a charge, a wedge of cavalry crashing into the rebels' flanks. You rally your militia beside him, spears bristling like porcupine quills. The rebels resist fiercely, sabers cutting arcs of silver, but you hold the high ground. With your militia's help, armed with captured grain sacks as impromptu shields, you drive the attackers back, scattering their survivors into the rolling grass. As the dust settles, the station's commander, a rotund UN captain, bounds down the palisade wall. "Your valor saved the station," he exclaims, clutching your forearm. He orders his troops to at once unload the caravan's tribute and send reinforcements to Kullenhurst. You exhale the first breath of relief since dawn. The tribute is safe at last. You gather with Khan, Jabi, and Petrok on the riverbank as porters unload furs into guarded stores, and smiths accept iron tools with pious gratitude. The Khan's courier once more appears, confirming your passage home. You salute Khan Jabi, a silent nod of mutual respect. He returns it with a slight bow, an acknowledgement that loyalty, even from peasants, is the most valuable tribute of all. Your return journey is a procession of triumph tempered by loss. The militia rides fewer deep, the wagons fewer laden. You pass through the Altai trail once more, this time without ambush. Under the open sky, you glimpse Marika's face, set with determination, and Tomas's gaunt, grateful smile. You've delivered more than tribute. You've carried hope across the steppe. At long last, Kullenhurst's walls emerge on the horizon, half crumbled, half intact, but unmistakably yours. Word of your approach spreads. Townsfolk line the roads, cheering raggedly. You enter under a flutter of banners, some the town's old crest, some the Khan's silver talisman. You dismount, spear in hand, and feel earth solid beneath your boots. Inside the gates, Mayor Aldrich embraces you, tears in his eyes. Marika and Petrok kneel, thanking you in whispered prayers. The tribute is distributed, furs to trade for grain, iron tools to repair walls, and enough honor from the Khan's enclave to deter further raids, if only for a season. That night, a feast erupts in the courtyard. Smoke rises from spit-roasted mutton. Drums beat in a primal rhythm. Laughter and song mingle under lantern light. You sit at the high table, Khan's talisman on your breast, and raise a goblet of barley wine. You share your tale of shield walls and court intrigue, mountain ambush and fortressed way stations, with ironic candor and wry smiles. Yet beneath the revelry, you know the Mongol threat endures. The horde's hoofbeats echo still on distant plains. Seasons change, Khans rise and fall, and allegiance must be renewed. Survival, you see, is not a one-time victory but an endless vigil, forging alliances, delivering oaths, and meeting danger with resourcefulness and resolve. As the feast reaches its thunderous peak, you stand and speak. To Kullenhurst, may our walls hold strong, our spears stay sharp, and our spirits remain unbroken. We have survived the Mongol horde. For now, the crowd roars. You take your seat, heart full, yet eyes watch the flickering shadows beyond the walls. Your journey has ended, but the true test of survival is only beginning, building a future on the hard-won peace you've secured. And in that peace, you know, lies the bittersweet victory of enduring history's most merciless storm and living to tell the tale.